Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was in Justice League. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. In Atlantis, Aquaman was utterly outraged, and it was not merely anger at Orm, but himself as well. All this time the blonde who was with Superman had been right all along. His pride, and his unwillingness to consider the possibility that there was indeed a traitor in his kingdom led to this. He was filled also with an absolute loathing for the soldiers who willingly went along with this and saw the arrogant smirk on Brack's face. That slimy bastard had been part of it the whole time, and now he realized just why Brack was so willing to defy him in the throne room before. He and Orm had planned this all from the start, and he only helped to make the process a lot faster than before. He could not help but feel the pain of that truth become more potent when he had to deal with Orm gloating about his plan as well as taunting him about his view on his leadership. I had to stand by and watch you lead Atlantis and our people to stagnation and ruin all because of your unwillingness to do what should be our destiny. To take the surface world and show those surface dwellers that we are their betters. Instead, our home gets polluted and WHGAT is rightfully that of Atlantis get taken and perverted by this primates above us. No more shall I let this happen. You are insane, Orm. This is treason of the highest level and you know it. Treason. This is insurrection, dear brother. A just insurrection to remove one who is lazy and truly worthless as leader of this nation. Take him away. Aquaman roared in anger and soon broke free, smashing blows into the now revealed traitor soldiers to his kingdom, and he intended to smash his fist right into the face of his traitorous sibling. However, Orm blasted him with the trident's power, fouling Arthur's attempt to fight, and the former king was now secured by the traitors. Orm looked at his sibling with now undisguised disgust and arrogance. Take him away. Brack smiled at that and replied. At once, my lord. As Aquaman was taken away, Orm began to think on his plans to finally take control of not merely Atlantis but the surface world as well. That was not the only direction his thoughts were going though. He had to deal with Mera and his nephew. But just as he was about to go into that direction, the object of the new train of thought in his mind came to him. Orm, I have been hearing rumors that Aquaman is alive here in Atlantis. Is that possible? Orm tried to and managed to maintain a calm and serious visage, though mentally speaking he was utterly livid with the idea that the reports of his bother had reached Mera's ears, but at least she had not been here to see them dragging away Arthur when he had shot his brother with the trident. I am afraid I cannot confirm or deny those rumors, Mera. For all we know, it could be some impostor or merely the stress of Arthur's loss that is affecting our people. Mera was not too pleased by this but spoke. How can you say such things, Orm? We have not yet confirmed anything. I know, but we have to assume the worst until we find out more, Mera. I will do all that I can to protect you, and your son. Mera may have been a very beautiful woman and a member of nobility, but she was not the least bit foolish. The way Orm spoke might have been an attempt to placate her. But the very fact that he was doing so in a tone that was odd, made Mera a lot more worried as well as suspicious. And being the woman of courage that Arthur had known her to be, she spoke. What do you mean by that, Orm? That was more than enough to make Orm realize that his attempt was not working, so he tried be a bit more forceful. I mean what I said, Mera. Cooperate and nothing will happen to you and your son. That was more than enough to finally convince Mera that something horrible was happening here, and she quickly left the room to look for her son. The second she entered the private room of her family, she saw to the cradle holding her child. Only to find that her son was no longer in there in his crib, and as far as she knew he was wrapped snugly in his blanket. The sight of it all filled her with horror and shock as she tried to find out what was going on. She, however, knew full well now who was the one responsible for this event of horror, and as she turned to look, she saw Orm looking at her. She felt shock, anger, and great fear, the last emotion due to what could be lurking in Orm's mind concerning her son. Why are you doing this, Orm? I am merely doing that needs to be done on account of your husband's foolish tolerance of the surface dwellers. By declaring war against them. It is already underway, Mera. Do not interfere. Orm then left, and made sure to silently signal some of his loyal followers to keep an eye on the queen. Once he disposed of both Arthur and his son, then he will rule what was his by right. And with enough time, even Mera herself would soon be his. The idea made the betrayer of Aquaman smile even more, as this would be his grandest moment. The surface dwellers had provided him with the means to enact his plan, and it was his own soon-to-be removed brother who allowed him to get it. Oh, the irony. Orm whispered to himself to avoid alerting anyone, a sound move on his part when one of the members of the Atlantean Navy came with a report. Lord Orm, we have news. Report. Our scanners have picked up the same craft used by the surface dwellers who came to save the submarine's crew. Orm gave a dark look at that and decided that dealing with them first was of high priority before moving the rest of his plan. Besides, they had to be contained lest they reveal the truth of his part in the attempt on his brother's life. And they could be used as scapegoats once secured and depowered with some devices of his. Deal with them in the manner those barbarians deserve. If you secure them alive, bring them to me so I can question them before I go to deal with the rest of their kind. Yes, my lord. In the javelin. The heroes of the League were not too happy with what they were doing since there was no telling what would happen once they got to Atlantis. The head start Aquaman had on them was a lot, though at least with the javelin they had made good time. Still, that hardly meant that they were in a relaxed mood, and like before they had more than enough good reason to be worried, though they also tried to be optimistic of their chances. Naruto, on the other hand, was not the least bit pleased by all of this. His long life and experiences back home made him more than aware that things would get really problematic once they got there. Kori spoke to Naruto, who had a grim look on his face as he was devoid of the mask for now. Are you all right, friend Hokage? Naruto's grim look did not leave him and he sighed as he replied. No, I am not, to be honest, Kori-chan. This is a very dangerous situation we all walked into. I have no doubt that the very second we get to Atlantis we are going to be in for a fight. Superman then replied. We should at the very least try to avoid that. We're not here to start a war, Hokage. We might not be, but whoever is the one who hired Deadshot certainly is. Remember that this guy is influential with that kind of wealth, allies, and has connections, no doubt. The very second that Aquaman got there, they no doubt are holding him captive, and the very second we show up, they may very well give the Atlantean Navy orders to shoot us on sight. That got their attention well enough as they agreed that Naruto had a point, and John replied. Then we're going to have to be ready for the worst. Diana then replied. True, but we still need to know just who the true enemy here is. We know that the enemy is no doubt of noble lineage in Atlantis and no doubt has vast fortunes to fund this coup. But I cannot fathom on who it may be, since my people have little contact with them, so we have no idea if there are people with ill intent towards Aquaman and willing to go to full-scale war. Superman, you dealt with Aquaman before than any of us. Is there anything you can share that might help you shed some light on this? Superman thought about it and replied with a reluctant shake of his head. Afraid not. My meeting with Aquaman years ago had me and Lois facing him and his fleet to convince him that war is not the solution. I never went to Atlantis at all, so I have no clue on the political landscape at all. Besides, I don't think they would have liked the idea of someone from the surface there. John replied. Well, that complicates things, but from a military standpoint, I can bet the persons got either support from the military, or if persons, then one of them no doubt would naturally be high up in the military ladder. You can't have a coup if you don't have military backing after all. Kori then replied. Then we must be ready, friends, for we have company. Kori's statement proved accurate as they soon spotted a number of ships, Atlantean ships, coming in. Superman gave a sigh and knew that it was decision time. John, try to contact them and tell them that we're not here for conflict. Naruto, however, broke free from his stance and spoke, grim focus on his face. We're too late. Sure enough, the Atlantean ships opened fired on the javelin, and they all knew there and it was no longer time to talk, but to fight. The Justice League quickly trooped out of the javelin, and they knew that the fight could not be avoided. Naruto was once more using the chakra shroud to allow him to not only move in the water but also to breathe, and took out his sword as he and the others were now in the water. Superman was obviously not the least bit happy, but he knew that there was no other option when the Atlantean ships began to fire their weapons at them. Naruto managed to block several attacks in close combat with several attacking Atlanteans on their usual rides. Naruto managed to channel his wind chakra to allow his sword better flow in the water, as well as increased cutting power to cut their weapons into the weapons of the Atlanteans. The blonde then knocked the attackers of their bikes and then joined the others as more of them came to take him and the others out. Superman quickly came to the aid of Jean when the Martian god attacked from the side and managed to take down the shooter and sent him off from his ride. Jean likewise turned intangible to another attack coming at him and then became tangible to grab the Atlantean and send him off his ride with a toss. Kori was moving quickly through the water and moved to land a punch into the face of another Atlantean to send him off his ride while firing one of her green star bolts into another riding his vehicle, forcing him to leave his ride or risk being blown apart with it. That allowed Starfire to close the gap, evading his shots with his weapon and landing another kick. Wonder Woman was quick to fight back against her own attackers, using her bracers to block several more blasts aimed at her direction by two more attacking Atlanteans. She then redirected the attacks towards the attackers and managed to destroy one Atlantean on his ride by redirecting the shots into the vehicle in question, and that allowed her to move in, blocking the next attacks with the same method with her bracers and then managing to avoid another barrage by moving up and over the incoming forces and then using her lasso to grab the nearest Atlantean and then yank him off his ride, slamming him into his companion. The rest of the League managed to take down a few more of the subs that were trying to destroy them with the use of torpedoes, and they evaded them. Once the Atlanteans were moving away from the fight, the League moved forward to get to Atlantis, but Naruto was not comfortable with the idea of them being able to make it this far. If the Atlanteans had pushed this a lot more than what they had just done, they would have managed to overpower them, as fighting in water was not as easy for some of the team, most of all him. However, he was not the only one who had doubts. Something is not right, Naruto. These Atlanteans are pulling back instead of attacking us outright. This is not an ideal battleground for us and they have the terrain advantage, so why would they give ground? I agree with that, Kurama, but they might not have the numbers to maintain their attack. Maybe, but I doubt that is so simple. This is their backyard, so why are they not fighting hard? John then spoke out as he blasted down another pair of Atlanteans with his ring. They are falling back. This is our chance to get closer to Atlantis. They moved forward, but Naruto's senses were still warning him, and Kurama was also more than willing to point out that this whole situation was way too easy for them. The blonde shinobi was more than willing to agree with the whole thing, and soon their combined worries were proven to be accurate when several areas of the nearby terrain suddenly popped up to release strange containers, but all of which was sending bad vibes with Naruto, along with the fact that this time, instead of engaging them head-on, the apparent Atlanteans' forces were forcing to keep their distance. Naruto managed to use his chakra shroud briefly to avoid an incoming hit from one such weapon, only through his still potent chakra and intense training plus Kurama's own that he was able to withstand the attack. That very same attack, however, sent him away from the others, and just as they were about to get to him, the canisters went off. They turned out to be depth charges and more than enough to stun the League. Naruto saw that but knew that he needed to avoid the rest of the attack and quickly guided himself away from the area. I hate doing this, but I have to make sure some of us don't get caught so we can rescue the others. Kurama merely growled a bit in agreement, as they both knew that if all of them got caught, no one was going to rescue them. The fact that they still had no idea just how things were in Atlantis itself was enough to tell them that looking for allies in said city was optimistic at best, and foolish at worst. His time as Hokage had never been easy, but they had their good points, and right now he had to use what he learned to good effect. Unfortunately, he had lost one of his swords in the battle, and while he was loath to leave his weapon behind, he decided to retrieve it later. If he knew one thing, if the bad guys did not find him, they usually would take something as a way to prove to their leader that he was gone. That or use his sword as a way to weaken the resolve of his allies to resist them. A good tactic too, and one that he knew the hidden villages, even his own at times, used when the situation was enough to warrant its use. But it was going to work to his advantage. In Atlantis, the rest of the League were not in the best of shape after being hit by those depth charges, and right now they were being held not merely by restraints. They were unable to use their full powers due to what appeared to be some form of power limiter and restraint that drained even Superman's strength. They had awakened in these restraints and learned of the power restrictors when they tried to move. It was not something they liked to happen to them, but right now they had to try and find out if they could find Aquaman and hopefully stop this from going any further than it already had. They were soon in the room and surrounded by a large number of Atlantean nobles, and naturally before them was Orm. Though it was obvious that none of the League had any idea that the one who was before them was the mastermind. What are you surface dwellers doing here in the sacred halls of Atlantis? The League looked at him, and Superman was the one to speak first. We came here looking for Aquaman. You barbarians have the audacity to come here looking for the very man you killed. Aquaman is not dead. Orm smirked mentally at that, but still retained the visage of an enraged brother to the king for his people. You are correct, fool. My brother is indeed not dead. But I plan to fix that little snag soon enough. What manner of trickery is this? Jean tried to use his telepathy but had no luck due to the restraints, but spoke anyway. There is no trick involved. We sent out news that he was in critical condition only to lure out his would-be assassin. Really? And what happened afterwards, surface scum? John growled at that but kept himself focused for now, even though it galled him not to be able to use his ring. We managed to find said assassin and learned who ordered the hit on him, but before we could inform him, he left us, and so we tried to follow him before he came here. And why is that? Wonder Woman then spoke. Because we have learned that the one who hired the assassin, one Deadshot by name, had been hired by someone who had access to treasure only found in Atlantis. Orm was angry at this. He felt that he should have sent someone far more powerful than some two-bit surface-dwelling mercenary scum to deal with his brother. The fool said he was best at what he did, but apparently had not finished the job he was hired for. No matter. Once he conquered the surface world, he would find this merc and make him suffer unheard of agony for his failure. But for now, he had a show to play out. You dare to accuse one of our people as being complicit to the death of our king. My brother, I should have your heads for this. Starfire then spoke. It all true. We have no reason to lie. Orm snorted and replied. You surface scum all lie, regardless of your form and looks. You dare to assume that you can come here to accuse us of plotting to kill our king. I shall have you suffer dearly for this. Diana then spoke. We know Aquaman returned to your kingdom to find out the truth. He was told of the possibility of there being a traitor in Atlantis before he came here. As long as one of us is not chained here, the truth will come out. Orm then spoke. You mean your companion who owned this sword? He presented the recovered sword of the Hokage, and the sight of the weapon was shocking to the rest of the League as they recognized the sword. Clark was shocked along with Jean, and Stuart was also shocked in the sense that he expected the blonde ninja was out of the firing line. But it was both Diana and Corey who were struck more than the others. The former was saddened at the possibility of the loss of one of the few to welcome her into man's world and someone she respected for his actions. And the latter obviously was utterly saddened by the possibility that her only friend in this new world was lost to her and she was unable to do anything about it. Orm was more than willing to milk this and spoke. His body was never found by my men, and considering the lies you said, I could care less if he is alive or not. Take them away. They will be the first to die for their crime of murdering our beloved king. Superman spoke out despite the fact that he and the others were being taken away. Aquaman is not dead. He is here already in this city. Whoever is the traitor is hiding this from you all. Lies. All nothing more than lies by surface dwellers. Take them away and deal with them. Yes, my lord. As the guards took the League members away, Orm began to look over the population and could tell that there was going to be a lot that had to be done. But for now, he had the momentum and he was going to make sure that he was going to be able to use all of it to finally bring his plans to completion. For now, however, he needed to take care of other important matters that could not be delayed. The others were not in the best of shape at this point as the water soon began to rise towards them. Orm, however, made sure that the water was going up at a fast but controlled pace, no doubt wanting to aver their suffering before ending them. That disgusted the League, and while they knew that they were powerless, they tried to find a way free themselves. Jean was not pleased one bit by all this. Unlike most of his compatriots, he did not need oxygen to breathe and therefore was not in danger of drowning as the others were. And had he been able to use his powers, he could have easily escaped, but with the power restrictor on, he could not becoming intangible and free the others. Thus he had the worst of it right now since he was now powerless in saving the others from what was to come. Orm unfortunately made a serious mistake in stating that Naruto was no longer along the land of the living. He had not made the proper action of confirming that the blonde really was dead, because he was anything but dead. And where was the blonde shinobi in question right now? He was coming for the others. And to make things a lot more complicated, was that a certain red-haired Atlantean queen had managed to listen in and was now resolved in what she needed to do. Back outside. The two Atlanteans did not think much on what the fate was of the missing surface dweller as there was no sign of a body, just rubble on the supposed cave he was hiding. They were only able to see a floating clump of seaweed heading in their direction. And what exactly could that seaweed do to them in the first place anyway? There's no sign of this surface dweller at all. I know. I rather doubt anyone could survive that kind of barrage. True enough, since we only found that sort of his and not much else, so I don't think we can stay here much longer. We should report back to the city and get ready to move out with the others. They did not care much for anything else at this point and decided to go for their plan to head back to the city, but as they were about to head back to the city and pass over the seaweed, they were suddenly attacked by chains from nowhere and were dragged off their bikes. They turned and soon saw the seaweed turn into the surface dweller that they had been sent to deal with. Their shock ended as Naruto quickly smashed them hard in the face. Once they were knocked out cold, the blonde ninja looked their vehicle over. He found what appeared to be cuffs of some metal. He took the devices and soon restrained the two. Once he was done, he headed out to where Atlantis was while using his chakra to move forward like before. He soon saw the city and could not help but whistle mentally to himself at the sight of the city, even though he was looking only at the dome that covered it. It was big, really big, and he could see just why Aquaman would do all in his power and authority to protect it. But right now he had to focus on infiltrating the city and finding the others before they made their move to neutralize the leaders of the revolt and find Aquaman. It was here that he managed to get into contact with Batman. The Dark Knight had stayed behind to make sure that he could keep track of the movements of the Atlanteans. Now that he knew was not being followed, he spoke to Batman. Batman, you there? Yes, I am. Where are the others? I lost track of you all when the Javelin got attacked. We're right on the money here, Batman. The traitor or traitors have already taken over. My guess is they must have guys in the military or the one doing this as head of it all. As for the others, after we ditched the Javelin after they attacked, we got broken up by underwater mines, came to later, but the others aren't with me. Alive. Possibly. No bodies at all right now that I can sense. Though with all this sea life and the fact I'm still getting used to being this deep in the water, I can't track them accurately enough, but they no doubt are in Atlantis since I can sense their chakra faintly right now. Where in the city I can't say since something apart from what I mentioned is interfering with my attempts to track them. Neither can I. Apparently there's some form of blocking field on the city of Atlantis. All right. I know you are still pissed off about the whole Deadshot thing, and I apologize for that, but we have to keep focus here since there's too much at stake. I know that, but don't do that again if you can find another way. I won't condone it and neither will the others. If I have to, I will kick you out of the league myself. Naruto heard the edge there in the voice and replied. Fair enough. At any rate, I'll head into the city and find the others. If we can bring that field or whatever it is blocking you, then we'll contact you. Got it. I'll try and find a way to bypass it on my end. Near one of the docks, two Atlantean sentries were on routine patrol and making sure no one would sneak into the place, though they were not sure just who was going to sneak into the city right now. They had not been told if there would be any other surface dwellers, and they were more than willing to see this campaign against the barbarian surface dwellers go underway. However, they made the mistake of doing so with their backs turned to the water nearby, and out came none other than Naruto, who moved slowly out of the water and then made his move. He used his kunai with ninja wire to grab the guard and drag him back before the Atlantean knew what was happening. Once he did so, he smashed his target's fist to knock the guy out. And while doing so quickly moved at high speed towards the next one, and his training, stamina, and whatnot gave him an edge. He might not be as fast as Flash, but he got the job done, and that at times counted more than anything. Good night. The last guard turned to receive one mean uppercut to the face that sent him flying, courtesy of one very irate blonde shinobi, as the other three were now out cold from the attacks of his two-cage bunshin. Once they were secured and out of sight, the blonde sent them out to try and get the lay of the land of the city, and possibly locate his friends a bit more effectively, as well as give any roving guards something, or in this case someone else, to worry about. He moved quickly through the city and then got to the highest point on the area that he could find, and when he was clear, he began to summon the nature charka into himself. Immediately he was in sage mode and began to scan the area to locate the others. Over time, when he had been able to work with the League, he decided to familiarize himself with their respective chakra signatures. And it was not very long that in this morass of beings, he found them, since they each had one that was unique. He had no problem locating Superman and the others, but noted that while they were alive, none of them were moving at all. That was something he did not like one bit, as that meant that they were being held captive, and considering the sheer amount of power and talent in the collection of chakra signatures, the Atlanteans may have some form of power restraints that can contain their powers. He stuck to the shadows in the city and used henge to avoid being found, while the rest of his cage bunshin moved through the city while also in henge, and when they were done, they disappeared in smoke and began to send the information to him. He now had a good lay of the city and also had a very accurate idea that the Atlantean Navy was packing up for something. That in itself was pretty bad, but he placed that aside along with his sage mode and headed out. One thing he did find out, though, that was of importance was that Aquaman had indeed arrived. Some of the guards had been talking, and since they were so focused on said conversation, the cage bunshin had no problem in henge getting close to them and hearing all it needed to hear before moving away on the guise of heading back to Eric's and then disappearing. So, Aquaman did make it. But the fact that all this is going on is that he was captured and hidden away somewhere. That must mean our royal pain in the ass is not here. We'll need to secure the others and then go to look for him. And find anyone who are not in on the coup in question. Right, now I guess we're off to the palace. It did not take a good amount of time for Naruto to reach the palace, and he tried to reach for Batman but found out very quickly that he had no luck in connecting to the Dark Knight, no doubt due to the dome, and he decided to not take any risks for now and blow his cover. He avoided a number of guards in the outer grounds and soon silently began to move up the walls using his chakra to help him stick to said walls. He spotted some guards nearby and could tell that they were not going to go anywhere, and thus became a problem for him to deal with. He quickly reached into his pouch and took out a pair of smoke bombs. He had to move fast since he had no idea if the Atlanteans had senses that could allow them to find him even in the smoke. But he was committed and had to do it now, since the others had to be rescued before really bad things happened to them. He rushed in and before the guards could raise their weapons, called the reinforcements in either order, tossed them to release the smoke. This gave him enough cover to close the gap and land haymaker blows on the guards to knock them out. He quickly used his senjutsu enhanced strength to grab one of their staff weapons and turn it into primitive but effective handcuffs, and in he went. So far it seemed that no one had figured out he was here, but he was not going to take any chances at all. Moving through the city was not going to be easy since he had no idea just how many guards are around and what kind of tech the people here had. As he moved deeper in the palace grounds, the shinobi also did his best to locate anyone who could be able to help him. That might have sounded wrong since he was technically inside enemy territory, but he had enough experience in him to know that not everyone here could be on the side of the traitors to Aquaman. And they could help him find his comrades as well as make sure that they could find the royal hard case and make sure he was not in a bad way. It was not long before his faith in the idea of finding an ally here of all places was vindicated when he spotted a woman carrying a mace. And not just any woman either, but the kind that had the trappings of royalty, despite the fact that she seemed to know how to use that mace, meaning a warrior woman in nature was before him. He kept himself hidden for a moment longer and then followed her. He managed to finally restrain the woman but made sure that he was doing so in a manner to make it clear that he was not an enemy. Still, he made sure to speak to her as well. Relax, miss. I am not here to hurt you. I'm looking for friends of mine who got captured. Mara calmed herself and gave a reply. Very well. No doubt you are referring to the surface dwellers captured by Orm then. I can help you free them. Naruto sensed no deception from the woman and he released her, allowing him to see that she was one hell of a beauty to boot. Naruto however squashed that thought since now was not the time for this sort of thing. My name is Hokage, with the Justice League, and you are? Mera, Queen of Atlantis and wife of the one you know as Aquaman. Naruto nodded and replied to that. Good to meet you, Your Highness, you know where they are. Mera nodded and they moved out as she spoke carefully to make sure her voice was not heard too quickly. Yes, I witnessed them being restrained and having power disruptors placed on them by Orm. I heard them saying that there was a traitor here in Atlantis who hired an assassin to kill my husband. Is that true? Every word of it, and gathering from what you just told me, then I can safely assume Orm is the traitor. Mera's grip on the mace tightened, and Naruto did not need to look at her face or sense her emotions to know that he had hit the proverbial target right on the bull's eye. Yes, he has not only taken your friends prisoner, but no doubt has done the same to Aquaman when he arrived. I had asked for truth of the rumors that he had returned, only to learn that my son was taken by Orm. And what I heard him say to your comrades made me all the more convinced that he has taken Aquaman hostage. I have no idea where he is, but I know that I need allies to help me find both my son and husband and to stop Orm. Naruto was quick to see the picture, and knowing what he knew of the traitor who now had a name, he ventured a bit more. Orm's high up in Atlantis nobility then to have done this? Mera nodded. He is my husband's half-brother. That did it. This reminded him way too much of his wife, Koyuki's situation for Naruto's liking. The fact that Orm had taken his own nephew, a baby hostage no less, only served to anger the blonde. Once that was over, he and Mera headed out to the place where the rest of the league were being held prisoner. But not before Mera guided him to a nearby room, and there he retrieved his sword that he had lost and had been used by Orm to show that he had been killed. Boy, was he going to have a field day busting that guy's bubble. In another part of the ocean, Aquaman growled mentally to himself as he tried to free himself from the heavy thick chains that held him close to the rock face. He had been taken here by the traitorous followers of his half-brother Orm and soon chained there. He wasted none of his energies cursing the traitors, namely Brack, who looked at him every now and then, and despite the foul worm's attempts to remain calm, he had no problem seeing the arrogance in his former general's demeanor as it happened. I will free myself, Orm, soon enough, and when I do, I will make your pain and the of Orms be legendary. He looked at the lava flow below him and he knew that the lava was how Orm planned to dispose of him. It was thorough, but it would not be enough. The chains would pose a problem, but he did not become king of Atlantis merely through blood connections and also because he married well. He was a warrior and was not the kind to give up without a fight. But any plan he had prepared in his mind was placed aside when the arch-traitor came. He glared at Orm and spoke to him with venom and the desire for retribution thick in his voice. You think you are going to succeed in this scheme of your, Orm? Orm gave a wicked sneer and replied. And who, dear brother, is going to stop me? You. You are weak-willed and soft, not the ruler or warrior Atlantis needs. Once I get rid of you, then my plans will move along nicely. Killing me is not going to bring you any closer to the throne, Orm. Perhaps, after all, the line of succession still stands. But I think I can deal with that easily enough. Orm soon presented a bundle wrapped in cloth. Aquaman soon recognized the bundle and was enraged even more when he saw it move, and out came a cry of a baby. My son. Damn you, Orm. As you can see, I have decided to end the last obstacle early on. He then placed the crying child next to his father, who struggled against the chains binding him as he saw his son crying deeply at the situation surrounding him. Children, apparently regardless of being human or not, could react to the emotional states of the beings around them. It was obvious that the malicious and cruel intent of Orm coupled with the anger and desperation of his father made the boy cry. Orm, however, had no pity in his mind when he moved away. To him, the removal of his nephew was all he needed to finally be free of his weak brother, claim the throne he felt was indeed his, claim the woman he also desired, and then bring the surface dwellers to their knees. All of it was proceeding well, and now he was going to make his last move to end this plan on a high note. He turned as soon as he was at a safe distance and fired a beam from the trident, destroying the rock formation, keeping the boulder upright, not enough to kill both quickly even if it was practical. No. He wanted the death of his brother and nephew to be slow and agonizing for them both, so he made sure to make as much debris as possible be there to make the descent slow. And besides that, as it picked up speed, it would handle itself from there. Goodbye, brother. I will make sure to tell our people that despite my best efforts, we were not able to save you and my dear nephew in time. Damn you. And to throw the final barb at his brother. And I will make sure to comfort Mera as she mourns your passing and that of her son. And when it comes, I and Mera will name our children after you both. Goodbye. Orm. However, back at the palace. As soon as they moved through the palace, the shinobi began to sense better the others, and he was pleased that they were still holding on. He, however, knew that he had to make sure that they got to them in time, as their life signs were not too good through his senjutsu enhanced senses as well as the enhanced senses thanks to Kurama. It also did not take long for him to sense a number of signatures matching that coming from Mera, which told him that they were soon going to encounter forces, and it was clear that they would be on Orm's side if they were guarding his fellow League members. It did not take long before they saw the guards, at least 4 of them, and Naruto stopped Mera. "We got some guards there. You ready for this, Your Highness?" Mera merely nodded, her grip on her mace tightening and her stance going to that of a seasoned fighter, showing to Naruto that she was not a delicate woman. He liked that, and the fact she was gorgeous made him smirk at how lucky Aquaman was in having a wife like her. That was placed aside though as he quickly charged at the first guard, and before the man could react, he used his speed to close the gap, cut down the weapon in his hand and landed a hell of an uppercut to the jaw. That sent the guy flying backward and allowed Naruto to move in and clash with the other guard coming in with a staff. The weapons clashed and they traded a few blows a bit more before Naruto soon knocked him aside. 2 more guards came in, but they were not prepared for Mera herself coming at them. Mera might not be as fast as Naruto, but she certainly was no slouch and had used his attack as a way to disguise her presence and then attacked. Needless to say, the sight of their own queen coming at them stunned the guards, and she made them pay for it. Naruto whistled in appreciation after seeing Queen Mera clonk one guard with that mace and quickly with the grace of a dancer smack the next one out like a light with another swing to show her more than expected strength. All of that happened very quickly, and he could tell that, delicate looks aside, she not only had strength, but one hell of a mean swing as well as exceptional speed and agility. That meant that despite her more than obvious good looks, she was no delicate flower and could easily make anyone trying to underestimate her regret it very quickly. And like any self-respecting man, he spoke to the queen. "That was very impressive, Your Highness. I can definitely say that your husband is a lucky man." Mera nodded and spoke to him. "Thank you, but we should hurry and free your friends from those power drainers." "Right." The two moved to free the rest of the League as the queen hit the controls and removed the water from the chamber. Once the water was out, he saw the others and was pleased to see that his fellows were unharmed. Once the barrier was down, he quickly channeled his chakra into his kunai and stabbed the devices hard with the blade covered with some of his chakra. Once the device on Superman was removed, the blonde could sense the energy come back to Superman, and he saw the man look at him with some surprise. Hokage. Nice to see you too, Superman. Don't worry, I am not a figment of your imagination. Hold on. He then cut through the restraints, and once the Kryptonian was free, he moved to free Diana and Corey. He did have a feeling of relief though that the women were not yet awake, since the devices used to restrain their powers happened to be right on top of their busts. He carefully removed the devices, and once he did so the two finally woke up, and it was Diana who spoke first. "Hokage. You are alive." "Yep, and it's nice to see you and the others are safe, Diana Heim." "Same to you as well, Corey-chan. I trust that those idiots did not try to hurt you as well." Corey's green eyes lit up with emerald fire and her smile became utterly pronounced as she spoke to Naruto. "Friend Hokage. You are alive." Naruto saw the happiness in Corey's eyes and her voice, so he replied with a smile of his own to his housemate, charge, and friend. "Yep, it's going to take more than what they did to take me down. But enough about that, we got to get out of here." The others nodded as Mera helped Superman stand up to allow him to recover. The move was not a permanent one as the Kryptonian felt his full strength return to him. Once he felt fully restored despite being deep in the ocean, he turned to free Stuart and Jean alongside Mera, who removed Stuart's limiter as he freed the last Martian. The last of the Martians got his powers back, and the same could be said for John when he managed to get his power ring to flare back to life. Superman then turned to Mera and she spoke to them in answer to the unspoken question on who she was. "My name is Mera. I am the Queen of Atlantis and wife of the one you know as Aquaman. No doubt you already may have figured out that there has been a coup here in Atlantis and the ringleader is Orm. He had taken my son not only a few hours ago after I heard rumors that Arthur had returned. He is not alone either, as I suspect that Brack, one of our senior generals, is with him, since he has always advocated military force against the surface world despite my husband's desire for the avoidance of military force unless all has failed." That was the nail in the coffin for the League as Jean spoke. Then it must have been Orm who had hired Deadshot, since as royalty he could have access to the kind of wealth to hire the mercenary in question. And if this General Brack is his ally, he no doubt would have countermanded Aquaman's orders to leave the sub alone along with the nuclear material. And no doubt when Aquaman came back here, then they captured him. Mera was outraged by the news that Brack and Orm had tried to have Aquaman assassinated, and if what these surface dwellers said was true, they had kidnapped not only their son but her husband as well. "Please, you have to help find Arthur and my son. Arthur may have accepted war as an option in the past, but he has changed despite what you may think. But Orm and his forces will not be swayed. They plan indeed to go to war with the surface world even if it defies my husband's wishes to avoid war." The others saw this and nodded, but Naruto decided to also put some 2 cents in, no doubt recalling his time in protecting his wife Koyuki. "We need to get the queen to safety first before we locate Aquaman. If Atlantis is like any monarchy, then we need to make sure that she is not used as leverage by this Orm. Plus, even with most of their forces gone, I'm willing to guess there's still some people here loyal to Orm. We take them out, we have a chance to find those loyal to the true rulers. Diana and Corey nodded in agreement as they were both of royalty and thus could see the validity of such a move from the blonde shinobi. They had to secure the Queen of Atlantis and protect her since losing her could be a major blow in their attempt to stop the coup since she still had authority and power as the mother of the heir apparent and wife of the king. As for Aquaman, Aquaman struggled with all the strength that he could muster into himself. He had to free himself first in order to save his son. The movement of the boulder was now picking up greater amounts of speed and he had no problem in know that time was against him. His son's cries egged him on and soon he screamed out his triumph as one hand was free, but he knew that he could not relax yet. He tried to free his other hand but saw that the chain was thicker here and what he did before would take too long. He looked down and saw the buckle of his belt that could be removed. Made from the finest alloy of his people's smithcraft skills, it was more than strong enough for heavy-duty work. It had an edge also, not sharp enough but it would have to do. He removed it and began to hack away at the chain. The blonde Atlantean knew that this was his last chance since the distance between him, his son, and the lava was growing shorter by the second and if he did not make it. No, he placed such thoughts aside, he would free his son, himself, and then deal with that wretched bastard of a half-brother. And then he would make bloody sure that those who sided with him would be made to pay for their betrayal of their king and his desire to help keep the peace. He continued with all that he had in him, but it became clear that time was running out, and the chain was too strong. Aquaman looked at the lava, his son, his chained hand, and his buckle. He thought of the last option, as brutal and bloody as it was, and made his choice on what course of action he was going to take now. He raised the buckle high and then sent it down with a cry, not at the chain, but at his own hand above the wrist. Back in Atlantis, as they moved through the city, Diana could not help but admire the design of the entire city itself. She had heard stories of Atlantis to be sure growing up back home, but seeing the city for oneself was a far more potent experience than what one would be most used to. I can see why your husband would do all he could to defend your people, your highness. This city is beautiful. Mera nodded in thanks and focused herself on helping the others make it to safety to the inner sanctum of the palace. They needed to get to a place that could not be easily accessed and could secure them all while they tried to find her husband and her son. Naruto said nothing but readied his kunai and before the others could ask what he was doing, he fired the weapons, right into the weapons of several guards who quickly took aim at the others. The throwing weapons had no problem jamming themselves into the front of the weapons themselves and they actually made the weapons explode. The Atlanteans screamed in pain and held their wounded hands as even though they made the move to toss aside their overloaded weapons, they were still in pain when the League launched their attacks. Superman flew in and knocked down a number of them while John quickly formed a shield to protect the Queen while Diana and Corey moved ahead with the Tamarinine providing long-range firepower that John routinely would open holes in his shield to allow to pass while Diana would be near Mera to protect her from attacks that she could not easily reach if he was too focused on deflecting the incoming firepower from the attacking Atlanteans loyal to Orm. John quickly used his own powers to give him a chance to get up close and attack the Atlanteans as well as give him a chance to scout ahead for more trouble. Superman was more than willing to charge in and attack the Atlanteans by destroying their weapons and knocking them out. He usually held back his full strength and still did though loosened a little of it to hit hard against the Atlanteans since they were a lot more durable than most. And the fact that he could move about now only added to that as he also used his heat vision to destroy some of their weapons and also take down some of the nearby pillars to act as distractions or to deny the enemy some form of cover. They soon made their way to the palace and they knew that they had to secure it. Naruto was quick to send out his Kage Bunshin to both scout out the palace a bit more and secure the rooms as well as play the role of distraction. That role simply had his Kage Bunshin take the appearance of the team and Mera. The others were used to seeing his Kage Bunshin by now though Mera obvious was not used to seeing the Kage Bunshin, even more so when they took the appearance of herself and the rest of Naruto's team. Later, once they secured Mera in the throne room and managed to find some of the Atlanteans who were loyal to Mera and Aquaman, which thankfully included a surgeon, they focused on looking for the missing king. The flyers in the group, namely Superman, Jean, and John Stewart. Naruto sensed with his senjutsu and Kurama's chakra and soon was able to sense the arrival of Aquaman and to his relief, he could sense a signature with them that was that of a child. The fact the child in question had a mix of both Aquaman and Mera's chakra signature confirmed that the son of the two was in good hands. Hold up. Something ain't right. Naruto thought to himself when he noted that there seemed to be some form of injury on Aquaman and as soon as the door opened to reveal Aquaman and the baby. But the very second Naruto's sense of smell picked up an all too familiar smell that only someone without excellent senses would miss, he frowned darkly and spoke to Diana. Diana Heim, get that surgeon we managed to rescue, the king is injured. The others were confused by that until Mera who had gone to greet both her husband and baby in happiness recoiled in shock and horror. They soon saw the cloak covering the man's arm and then heard Mera speak to her husband. Your hand. Aquaman did not respond to that immediately and merely spoke sternly despite the fact that Naruto could see that his wound was making things difficult. Where is Orm? The others in the league could only look on as the surgeon worked on healing or in this case attaching an artificial limb weapon on the stump that was the king's arm. Naruto and the others got the full story from the man and he had to give the man credit where credit was due. He willingly sacrificed his hand to have the means to save his son. That was something the blonde had no problem respecting as it reminded him deeply of his parents' sacrifice to save him. Both died to save him and he could easily see that same desire in Aquaman. It was also similar to the time that he met the Raikage who willingly severed his own arm in the middle of the forearm after being hit by the flames of Amaterasu so he can still fight to defend his beliefs, and his village. That made him respect the man even more, but it was fairly obvious that some of the team were none too comfortable with what they learned. He took his own hand. I can't believe it. Wonder Woman said with shock as they watched the healer tend to Aquaman. John shook his head and replied. Told you he was a madman. Naruto snorted at that and replied sternly. It's not madness to risk everything, even sacrificing a limb if it means saving someone you love. Lantern. Back home, I knew a mother who willingly gave herself over as a hostage to a band of thugs if it meant that her son would not wind up being beaten within an inch of his life and paraded around like a grisly trophy by a madman. Thank the Kami it never came to that and both were saved in the end. Unless you are in the same spot Aquaman was in or the mother I knew of, don't call anyone willing to sever a limb to save a loved one mad. John gave a look at Naruto and sighed as he understood that the blonde was right. Sorry about that. Nah, let's focus on the here and now. This Orm guy's already got a good head start on all of us so we have to stop him. Aquaman looked at them and replied. As much as it pains me to admit, your blonde companion is right. Orm however is my problem, not yours. Superman however was not going to let that slide. No, he is our problem, yours and ours. He may be an Atlantean citizen but he also threatens our world. Like it or not Aquaman, we have to work together to stop whatever it is your brother intends to unleash on us all. Aquaman looked at Superman and could tell that he meant every word, and the same sentiment was present on the rest of the league. None of them would yield when it came to something like this one. It was here that Batman finally managed to call things in. Apparently the interference that cut communications in the city to the surface was a generator system activated by Orm. Batman here, can you read me? Superman nodded as he tapped the communicator and spoke to the Dark Knight while Aquaman was still working on letting the surgeon attach the weapon on his arm. The sight of that was not the least bit pleasing to the blonde shinobi but he said nothing as he could see why Aquaman would take that route. It was not only a weapon, but also a grim reminder of his mistake of not making sure that he was watchful for enemies within. Batman however was on his way elsewhere while talking to Clark. I've managed to locate the Atlantean Navy. They appear to have holed up all their main forces in the Arctic and I am already picking up a very increase in thermal energy readings in the oceans. Whatever it is, you can bet that it is not natural. How bad? If the temperature increases we are talking about a complete destabilization of the natural ocean currents, increased flooding in coastal areas, and a whole slew of natural disasters. I'm guessing that whatever is doing this is some sort of super weapon based on using extreme temperatures to melt the polar ice caps. And if the Atlanteans are there, then we already know who built it. That was not missed by everyone in the room and all eyes were in Aquaman. The blonde Atlantean knew that now was not the time for comments that could be misinterpreted. He had to be truthful about all of this and not hesitate this time. Orm is using a thermal generator weapon. I developed it as a contingency plan if it ever came to the point that war was inevitable. I however left it alone after being rescued by Superman after that one named Lex Luthor captured me. What? John was not happy by that revelation but was stopped by Jean, showing that now was not the time to lose focus on the task at hand. Diana on the other hand was calmer in that regard and spoke. If that is the case, then he must have been the one to steal the plutonium. He is after all your brother and with him and Brack, there is no way anyone who was not part of this coup would think to question his removal of the material if they ordered it. Corey agreed as she was quick to see how that was accomplished without Aquaman's knowledge since if what they learned was to be used as a reference, then the removal was done when. Superman was quick on the uptake and soon the others were as well. He must have stolen the plutonium to serve as a power source then, we have to stop this, all of us. Aquaman finally nodded as he looked at the harpoon that replaced the hand he had sacrificed to save his son. Then let us be off. As they soon reached the pole region where the doomsday weapon was, it was perfectly clear to the gathering heroes that the Atlantean Navy was in force now. Naruto along with Batman who had joined up in his own fighter were heading there along with those who could fly, which was pretty much everyone, with the marked exception of Aquaman who was in the water swimming to the direction of his forces. It was safe to assume at this point that only those who were with Brack were on Orm's side and the rest were merely following orders on the belief that Aquaman was no longer alive. That was something they had planned to capitalize on, but right now, stopping Orm and his followers was critical. It did not take long for the rebel Atlanteans who were on Orm and Brack's side to open fire on the incoming heroes, but they were ready for this. The stakes were too high for them to do otherwise. As soon as they got there, the forces under Brack and Orm did not waste time trying to stop them from trying to get to Orm. Aquaman used his harpoon to attack those with weapons and knock them out his fists. Naruto leapt down from the plan E of Batman and landed on the water's surface and began to use water walking to allow him to run on the water and then unleash several elemental jutsu, including his wind affinity and also using close combat moves to boot. Diana used her rope to unseat any of the soldiers. Corey unleashed green bolts on the weapons of the ships that were on the surface as well as force the Atlanteans to duck and break over while Jean did the same thing and tossed the soldiers around while Green Lantern and Superman were attacking the heavier subs with the bigger weapons. The team continued to fight with the Atlantean soldiers with all that they had, but Aquaman decided to head off and deal with his brother as Batman arrived and reported that the damage to the North Pole's ice caps was getting worse. Superman knew that they had to hurry, but they could not afford to ignore the Atlantean Navy either. Superman then decided to make his move as he spoke to the others. Wonder Woman, Starfire, Jean, and I will deal with the Atlantean Navy and keep them from getting into the heat of things. Lantern and Hokage will have to support Aquaman and meet up with Batman. We have to stop Orm quickly before things get even worse in this situation. Got it. Both of the heroes were accompanying Aquaman and supported him when being attacked. John managed to take out Brack's water bike as the traitorous general led the next counter-attack. Aquaman then summoned a killer whale that flew out from the water and scattered the forces of the Atlanteans before him. Green Lantern was impressed and the Spartan had to admit that it was also impressive. However, they knew that they still had to focus on helping Aquaman as they covered his back, though Lantern decided to meet up with Batman while the blonde shinobi covered Aquaman from those who would try to attack him and Aquaman. As Aquaman entered the cave where the control panel of the generator was, he kept a wary eye out for Orm. It was clear to him that Orm would be here since he would want to be there to protect or sabotage the device. He had to reach the control panel and shut this device down and stop this war from going on any further than it already has to save as many lives as he could manage. All he could hope for right now was that Orm did not change the codes needed to shut down the device. Once he powered down the device, he would personally deal with Orm and make him pay for what he had dragged the kingdom into. It did not take long for him to find his brother, and he naturally wanted to make sure that Orm knew just who he was about to fight. Orm. Orm turned and he glared at his brother while wielding the trident. He spotted the prosthetic and quickly guessed just how his brother had escaped. And despite his hatred of him, he had to give his brother some credit for taking such a risk like that as well as actually going through the whole thing and instead of resting come here with a weapon in place of his hand. You cut off your own hand. It seems you are not as cowardly or weak-willed as I thought. You call me weak-willed? I will make you pay for what you have done to the kingdom by dragging them into a war and trying to kill me and my son. Orm growled and replied as he leveled the trident at his brother. You will regret those words. I have the power now. And once I make sure that you are truly dead, all will be mine. Aquaman roared as he swam straight for Orm, intent on either strangling his sibling or skewering him in the gut with his new hand in retribution. But Orm knew that he was still armed with both his hands and the trident and was confident of his chances of success. However, Aquaman was not going to make it easy as he fought on against his brother. The two Atlanteans traded blows back and forth until Aquaman managed to knock aside his brother with a kick that sent Orm to the ground, allowing Aquaman to stand up and looked over him. This battle is over, Orm. Orm smirked a bit and replied. You're right, and you lose. He turned, grabbed the trident and fired blast at the control panel and he replied. Now nothing can stop the generator. The surface world will finally get its long overdue fate for all the times they have destroyed and polluted the oceans, the one that you never gave it in your cowardice. Aquaman had no time to react as he was hit by another beam of energy from the trident as they were once more fighting with one another. Aquaman's new weapon proved to be useful as this allowed him to block the trident and attack with his right hand and injure Orm. However, it was not going to be easy as Orm was able to attack better with both his hands. It was then that Orm was able to hit Aquaman with another blast to send him out of the cave, but he was able to his harpoon to stop himself from falling deeper into the cave. Orm had a smile on his face as he planned to finish off his brother, but before he could do anything, he was stopped by Naruto, who used a combination of kunai tied with small and less powerful explosive tags and a blast of wind chakra that was made in such a fashion to resemble an explosive blast of air fired from an air cannon. The combined attacks were more than enough to force Orm back as the blonde decided to cover for Aquaman to recover. The former Hokage moved in and unleashed a barrage of shuriken and senbon at Orm as Aquaman began to climb up from where he had been knocked over by Orm's attack. The thrown weapons were all real but were not thrown towards their foe with direct lethal intent, as he had to avoid getting Aquaman caught in the crossfire as well as delay Orm so the blonde king could deal with the pain in the ass himself. The weapons soon made their way past Orm's defenses as some of the shuriken and senbon hit Orm on the chest and legs with non-lethal hits but still allowed an amount of blood to be spilled, making the Atlantean scream in shock and pain at the hits as he glared darkly at the one who shot him and leveled the grinning shinobi. You filthy savage. Naruto quickly moved out of the way using his reflexes and speed to avoid being hit by the energy of the trident as Kurama soon spoke to him about the energy generated by the weapon. That thing's got some serious juice behind it, that much I can sense. Don't get cocky with this guy Naruto, all he needs is an opening and he'll take it. Naruto was more than willing to tangle with Orm after recovering his sword using one of his chakra chains to recover said weapon and then using another chakra chain to block Orm's attempt with the trident to skewer him. Once he got the sword back he took out his kunai and soon went to work on the foe before him. Orm growled and tried to attack Naruto but the blonde was not going to let this be an easy fight. He blocked a strike to his head and then blocked a strike with the staff end to his chest at the side with his kunai before he pushed back with his strength. The man roared at the blonde and attacked with thrusts and slashes with the trident. You will not stop me from ruling what is mine, you dirty savage. You're calling me a savage. Look who's talking, traitorous scum. You dare call me scum? Naruto snorted and replied. What, are you deaf as well? Yeah, I called you scum because that is what you are. You betrayed your brother, the rightful king of the kingdom. You gladly would sacrifice your own nephew, the heir to the throne, and you would declare war on the surface only for the chance to be more powerful. You qualify as scum more than once with a resume like that. That insult sent by the blonde ninja made Orm scream in anger as he began to blast as Naruto who moved, using the ice formations to give him cover from incoming fire. He then moved quickly to smash into Orm again with his sword before he moved the trident aside and smashed a fist into the face of the bastard traitor of Atlantis, that made Orm reel back in pain and anger which only a blind, deaf, and mute person would miss. Naruto dodged another stab at his side and flipped over the man and he roared at the blonde and managed to force Naruto to defensive with him blocking the attack as he spoke in an angry tone laced with arrogance. I am nothing like that spineless coward of a brother. I am the rightful king of Atlantis. And I will remove all those who stand against me and in turn the greatness of Atlantis. Please, you're nothing but a power-mad warmonger and traitor. You think that you will bring Atlantis to greatness. You will only bring it to ruin and into a war that is pointless to begin with. You speak as if you are going to win, barbarian. I will see you defeated kneeling before your betters. That attempt to rile Naruto only amused the blonde as he replied. You make me kneel. Ha, I'd love to see you try. Orm and Naruto clashed once more and the blonde managed to avid more strikes aimed at him but also kept his senses alert for the return of Aquaman. His goal was not to defeat Orm directly, no, he had planned to let Aquaman deal with his traitor of a brother since this was still Aquaman's fight. He soon sensed the return of Aquaman and he smirked a bit mentally and backed away and sheathed his sword. Orm in his anger and arrogance spoke at the blonde. You think I will not strike you dead for your words, barbarian? I will strike you down for your insults to the rightful king. Yap, yap, yap. Don't think I'm surrendering, I was merely delaying you, so he can finish this. Orm had no time to react as Aquaman appeared and landed one nasty left hook right into his face, sending him reeling as Naruto moved back to Lantern and Batman to see if he could help the two of them. As soon as he got there, Batman looked over the ruined control panel and while not as tech-savvy as the others when it came to tech like this thermal generator thing which was like a souped-up version of the generator back in the land of snow, spring, Naruto could tell that fixing it the traditional way was a bust. And the Dark Knight proved that to be right when he spoke. The whole system is ruined, no chance of stopping it using the control panel. That's a waste. Any ideas? Only one, I have to remove the plutonium from the core to shut it down. John was wide-eyed at that and replied. You're going inside that thing. No other option right now, can your ring shield me? John looked at his power ring and made his decision, there's too much going on for him to bother asking questions. And as crazy as the idea was that Batman cooked up, it was not like they had 100 other options open to them. Only one way to find out. Naruto had to give Batman credit for having balls to suggest that. He read up on nuclear material and how deadly they were, along with other things, and knew that if John's ring could not do the business, then Batman was dead. But that meant that he had to watch over John as he was the source of the shielding. Anything happens to him as Batman was in there, the Dark Knight was defenseless. I'll make sure no one blindsides John. Last thing we need is him losing focus on shielding you. The two nodded and soon got to work as Naruto quickly got himself ready to defend John, but also wondered briefly on what was the state of the battle outside. He then had an idea but then asked Kurama to shield himself and avoid being detected by John. Kurama agreed then soon Naruto spoke out to John. John, can you hear me? Yes, what is it Hokage? How is the fight outside? We are holding our own thus far. It appears that Aquaman's arrival has shaken them up and we are using it to our best advantage. What is the status with the generator and Orm? Naruto filed him in on the plan and John replied. Risky, but we have little options, what do you need? Can you send in Starfire or Diana here to double the security on the off chance we have company? Orm and Aquaman are already at it, but I doubt that Nut did all this on his lonesome. Very well, hold on while I send in some help. That came not a moment too soon, as several Atlanteans aligned with Orm came in and began to fire at them, forcing Naruto to fight them off but also stay close to John to protect him and in extension Batman. This was not something he liked doing, but soon he got a reprieve as a blast of green energy hit some of the attackers as Starfire came in. Stay away from my friends. The Tamarinine beauty came in quickly and soon joined Naruto, who was quite pleased with her arrival. The only one who was not, however, was Orm himself, as he saw what they were doing and quickly directed his attention to them all. Stop. That, however, cost him as Aquaman came at him once more and soon he was forced to turn back to fight his half-sibling. This carried on for a while longer until Orm moved to using a dagger after being disarmed of the trident by Aquaman. The traitor was now under the grip of full-blown anger and tried to skewer his former king and half-sibling with the dagger, all the while shouting out at him. You do not deserve to wear the crown or the throne, you weak and spineless coward. That, however, was a mistake, as Orm's anger clouded his sense of direction as well as potential hazards as he stepped on an uneven section of ice. The ice was also weakened by the very generator that Orm used and lost a good portion of its durability, and it was there and then that the floor broke down and he fell. He was forced to drop the dagger and reach out to the rest of the ice. He only had one arm, however, that he could use with the distance he had, managing to grab the edge and look down and saw Yawning Pit beneath him. In that moment, he knew that he was now in peril as Aquaman stood up and looked at him. He begged to be saved at this point as he tried to reach out for his brother as his strength was beginning to fade due to his battle with his brother. Brother, help me. Aquaman looked at him and his wound from before. He reached out his hand, but not to get his brother as Orm looked on in shock. He took the trident and spoke. I believe that this is mine. Orm cried out as he fell down into the dark pit as Aquaman looked on and headed off to see if the generator was taken out. Batman, Green Lantern, Corey, and Naruto were finally able to get the generator down as the Dark Knight was able to stop it and begin the cool down of the generator. Green Lantern was able to speak at this as the generator was powering down. It's shutting down. You did it. Batman shook his head as he got out and landing on the floor, and Lantern retracted his energy. No, we did it. Aquaman arrived, and while he remained calm, he was happy as well. Then the threat is over. Kurama, however, was quick to point out something. You might want to reconsider that statement, Blondie. Turn around, Naruto. Guess who's back? No. The group turned to see Orm enraged and no doubt armed with something, and sure enough, he was indeed armed. It appeared to a sphere with triggering devices, and none of them had to take a wild guess about the thing being a grenade. Orm looked at Aquaman, Green Lantern, Batman, Starfire, and Naruto with absolute madness and rage in him as he shouted. You will not leave this place alive. Naruto, however, had enough as he quickly summoned his chakra and then used his jutsu to control the still freezing cold water around him and the others. The same can be said for you. Sweden. Kyojin Nami. A massive wave of pure cold Arctic water smashed hard into Orm, and he was not the least bit done as he spoke to John. Lantern. Surround the sphere with your ring energy now. John did not hesitate, and soon a sphere of green energy surrounded the mass of cold water that restrained Orm, and Naruto soon tapped into Kurama's chakra and then launched more of the water around the sphere, and after the water began to harden in the cold icy wind, he then used his wind chakra. Fuuton. Hateshinaisenpuu. The summoned wind was thick and dense, which helped with the freezing of the water to create a massive ice prison sphere to hold Orm. Once he was sure that the ice was thick and strong, he signaled for John to remove the barrier. The end result of that, and the fact that the sphere was now dumped into the open, was the freezing of the water to form a spherical prison of ice. The mad Atlantean managed to retain some common sense and deactivated his weapon, now aware that the detonation would have killed him in this new prison. But that hardly meant that he was not going to make his anger known to the ones who held him prisoner. The madman railed at them and pounded on the ice as Naruto sighed. The guy's shouting was a pain in the ears. How did you ever tolerate this guy? Aquaman knew all too well the question was directed to him, so he did not hesitate to answer. Sometimes even I wish I can have that answered. But now I must deal with Orm before he escapes somehow. I will not let him get the chance to be plagued to the people he willingly betrayed. Naruto nodded, and it seemed that both Batman and Lantern were willing to let this be settled between Orm and Aquaman. As the man moved with his trident in hand, he looked squarely at Orm, who was still trapped in the ice prison made by Naruto and John. Orm's face was full of hatred and anger, but Aquaman ignored it and spoke even if his brother would not hear him. You betrayed us all for power, and you were willing to lead our people into a war, Orm. You willingly would kill the heir to the throne, my son and your own nephew, and no doubt take Mera as your own. For those crimes I should have you executed once and for all, but for today, you will remain in this prison for as long as it remains as such. But make no mistake of this, Orm. Escape and continue to harm the people you betrayed, and even those of the surface world, then I will stop you personally. Orm's face contorted with rage, and he shouted what one could easily understand as expletives and insults to Aquaman. This was more than enough to prove that even with the amount of ice and water that he was in, the traitorous Atlantean still was able to hear him. Aquaman ignored that and soon allowed more blocks of ice to move and surround the sphere of ice, increasing the thickness of the ice prison and soon burying the place deep in the ice. Once that was done, he looked at Naruto, Batman, and Green Lantern and gave a nod to show that he was done. They soon left as Aquaman had now begun to work on gathering together the remains of the Atlantean navy and finding those who were truly part of the plot and those who were duped into believing the lies Orm and his lackeys had been sending out. In Atlantis, Naruto could not help but feel like vomiting in disgust at how Brack was pleading for his life and his freedom. The same sentiment was apparent on the face of Aquaman, Mera, Green Lantern and Batman. He recalled a few times when he had to deal with sniveling cretins like Brack who, after realizing he was on the losing side after betraying the rightful leaders, would try to pretend and act like they were truly not aware of it all. But naturally this was balanced off by the fact that he had fought with villains who were more than willing to go all the way even when defeat was staring at them in the face. At least they had the backbone to see things through, unlike this sniveling excuse for a general. If given half the chance he would have buried Brack alongside Orm in that massive frozen prison of ice. But that would be Aquaman's call, not his, since as king, it was up to him how he would deal with the rebellious coward who did not even have the balls to stand up for himself. Aquaman apparently had enough as well and made it perfectly obvious to the general and his followers who were now being watched intently by those who had proven their loyalty to the rightful ruler of Atlantis. Enough. You have shown where your true allegiance lies to me before Brack, and do not think you can convince me otherwise. By all rights I should have you executed for this. But no, you will serve as a warning to all who side with tyrants. Take him to the deepest and darkest prison we have and make sure he remains there for the rest of his natural life. Yes, your highness. Brack's attempts were soon at an end as the rest of the League who could be there were also looking on. Diana and Corey showed disgust at Brack while John was deep in thought about everything that happened ever since they encountered Aquaman and also his own actions in the mission. Superman along with John looked as the man was escorted while Batman was not too pleased about what he learned ever since this mission went down. Aquaman sighed as he began to think about all that had happened and began to speak once more. I have made many mistakes this day. I have been so blinded in the belief that my people's enemies were on the surface, that I did not think that the greatest danger to my family, my people, and my home would be right underneath my nose. Naruto could not help but agree with that. Danzo rang a bell in his brain in that regard since that bastard gave more trouble than good solutions. But for now he said nothing as it was not long before John himself was the one to speak, and in hindsight, it was a good thing since the two of them needed to be the ones to patch things up between the two of them so there would be no more issues. Both of them were passionate protectors in their own right, but Naruto had no doubt that this event taught both of them to always look things on both sides of the fence. But for now he had to think about what he would do once he was back in Los Angeles, and already after this adventure, he had some new ideas for a new book. Back in LA 3 weeks later. Carol whistled as she looked at the newest book written by Naruto, who had just gotten back at least a week after the mission and had burned the midnight oil to make this new book. So far it highlighted a new story that dealt with an underwater adventure with drop-dead gorgeous women and more. She looked at Sage Naruto Uzumaki and after a few minutes decided to speak to him seriously. This wouldn't happen to be related to that little incident with that Aquaman fellow and the Justice League by any chance. Naruto grinned and replied. Yeah, you could say that. Anyway, I take it that the story's okay, boss. Carol smirked and replied. Yep, knowing your penchant for good imagination, it will do all right. At any rate, usual fee for the book and also for at least 3 more sequels, sound fair? All right with me. Anyway, any luck with your friend Miss Lane? Carol sighed a bit and replied. Not at the moment, so we should wait until she is available, though considering she happens to be sweet on Superman I think that might take a while to happen. In the meantime, I'll get this new story of yours into circulation, a test first to see how people accept it, and then we'll make it from there. Got a feeling though that after that mess in the World Assembly with that Aquaman character some time ago, there will be some people who might not be too happy with reading about this right away. So we'll make sure to plan the release once things calm down. At any rate, anything else to add to this one? Naruto shook his head at that. Not right now, though it's mostly a draft idea. At any rate, I should get the rest of it ready for the first unveiling. Be sure that you do, Sage. You've gone and done a lot of food work so far and I'd hate to have to let you go even if you only do part-time work for my company. At any rate, I think it's best that you can take some early time off. Business has picked up but not enough for you to be here in the office for a while. Right there, boss. Anyway, I will be moving on. Sure thing. Oh yeah, don't forget to come in the office later before the end of the week for you check. Plus I think it's time we do some catching up since it's been a while. The seductive smirk on Carol's undeniably attractive face made Naruto smile and he replied to that. Sure thing, I will not miss it for the world. Later. Naruto was once more out on patrol in LA and moving through the buildings while keeping an eye out for anything that was way off the normal charts. Kurama was likewise keeping an eye on things to support his longtime partner from anyone trying to tag him, and so far nothing dangerous was detected by the war-hardened Biju. And while the blonde had managed to have a nice meal to ease any hunger pangs he had with him. Looks like it's going to be another slow day. Kami was hoping for some more action on dry land for a change after that little stint in the oceans. You sound disappointed. Of course I am disappointed. There's nothing here to make me feel stimulated, apart from a few scrapes and the like. We don't have a lot to do. Anyways, how come your red-haired babe from outer space friend is not with us? Cory-chan's gone off to be on the watchtower with Diana and Jean for now. Figured getting the chance to see space would do her some good. And before you ask, Raven-chan is currently reading more of her favorite books, and I made sure to leave her some very nice food and drink if she needs them. Right. Well, let's hope we get some action around here. Dealing with the regular thugs, even the boosted ones with drugs, are not as entertaining. Hold up. I'm picking up something weird coming in. Naruto stopped from his leap and quickly launched a chakra chain to secure himself to climb up to the roof of the building. Once he got there, he began to focus all of his senses on what was going on. What do you sense, Kurama? Human all right, but mixed with animal. Feline from the feel of it too, and definitely know the kind we're familiar with. Better head over there, Naruto. If I recall enough, that's where some of the banks are. Naruto wasted no time and headed there as fast as he could. He did not take long to get there when he saw a dozen injured officers nearby, alive but certainly going to be feeling some serious pain in the morning afterwards, and some of them sporting claw wounds. That explains the feline energy signature I picked up. If I didn't know any better, I'd say we're fighting someone with animal traits in them. Obviously not natural, and quite possibly some sort of bio-weapons experiment or some poor schmuck who got in way over something. This remind you of that time that Mizuki Nut came back to make your life miserable? You just had to bring that one up, huh? Naruto growled, recalling the time he had to fight none other than Mizuki, who had escaped prison and had ingested an old formula-developed Orochimaru as a way to hybridize human and animal DNA together to create living weapons with unique abilities. Naturally, while it gave Mizuki a serious edge, it eventually destroyed him. Proof that not only was the formula utterly unstable, but Orochimaru did not give a damn about life that much unless he got something out of it, and knowing that bastard, he got enough from Mizuki and left him to rot. He never liked Mizuki one bit and was actually pleased he may have lived but never became a ninja while he was alive. Placing that out of his mind, he moved into a bank that apparently was the target of whoever was the hybrid. He had a feeling that this new guy was another one like Mizuki, a muscle-bound oaf with no brains and uglier than sin. Unfortunately for Naruto, his thoughts on the matter proved to be dead wrong the very second he faced the figure who came out from the vault with a huge bag of money. The figure was that of a woman, all the right curves and swells in all the right places, and had the muscle tone to show an athletic build that could easily make heads turn. Not to mention the fact that she had a rather interesting bust to boot. The fact that she was only covered in fur meant that she was technically buck naked. And despite the fact that not only did have not only cat-like features but a tail as well, she certainly was eye-catching, in an utterly primal exotic catgirl kind of look. Okay. Definitely a heck of a lot better looking than that bastard Mizuki ever was. Who the heck is she? Naruto indeed had no idea who she was and was right now trying to figure out just what was his next course of action involving the now obvious thief before him. Sure, he could get the whole cat burglar bit from Selena. This new arrival before him, on the other hand, was taking that term to a level that was definitely new to him. It was fairly obvious to him, though, from the injured police officers and bank employees around, that she was more than able to hold her own. He finally spoke to the literal catgirl before him. Okay. This is definitely new to me, lady. Who are you? The catgirl merely cocked an eyebrow and spoke in an accent that definitely screamed intelligence and drive to Naruto, and the slight purr that came with being half feline only added to the whole mix. Now that's a first. Usually most guys I know try to aim guns at me and call me freak or monster. Naruto could sense the truth there, along with some measure of hostility, so he could tell that this was not something that was going to be on a hair trigger. So he tried the diplomatic route first before trying something a bit more on the side of physical aggressive force. Well, obviously I'm not one of the usual guys you deal with, miss. Cheetah will do. Cheetah. Wait, that speed demon of a predatory cat in that continent called Africa, you dolt. Right, and don't call me a dolt, though I certainly never heard of her before. Maybe you haven't, but I'm wagering a guess some of the longtime heroes here on this world might have. Better given them a call first, though I doubt our new guest is going to let us let her go that easily. Right. Okay, now I know who you are. Can I take a guess you know who I am? Cheetah nodded as she placed down the bag and spoke. Yeah, you're the Hokage everyone here in LA talks about. But regardless, you are not going to stop me from doing this. Even if you are indeed with the League, there's no way I will give up without a fight, so come on. Naruto quickly used his kunai to defend himself when Cheetah came at him with claws coming out from her fingertips and clashed with the steel, forcing him to move back. The blonde ninja knew there and then that this was not going to be an easy thing to deal with. He dodged another attempt to slash into him by the hybrid female and managed to move in and land a kick to her stomach to get some distance between them. Cheetah coughed out some air from the blow along with a cry of pain, but she was not backing down either. As she came at Naruto with a roar and slashed at him constantly. It was obvious to the battle-hardened shinobi that she lacked combat training and was relying on a more animalistic fighting style to take him on. That did not mean she was not capable, since like Mizuki, her hybrid form was obviously giving her some physical advantages. Higher level strength being one of them, better speed, and higher resistance to impact, though not by much. The two moved to the wall and Naruto quickly ducked and heard a loud scratching noise above him to see 3 claw slashes on the nearby wall from Cheetah's attack. The blonde quickly landed a powerful shoulder charge into Cheetah before she could go after him again. The blonde finally took to the offensive and launched a number of fierce attacks on Cheetah, forcing her to move back, and more than once the attacks had come close to her. The blonde soon used taijutsu and soon the two of them were locked in a battle of wills. Cheetah, or rather, Dr. Barbara and Minerva, could not help but realize that taking on the Hokage was not exactly the best idea, since he had already more experience and skill than most people she fought with. The former scientist and reluctant criminal had come to Los Angeles to steal more money in order to find a cure for her current state. She knew that she would be in the Hokage's territory but had hoped that she had time on her side, since Los Angeles was a large city. Now as she began to push back against the ninja, she knew that she could not afford to keep fighting with the blonde. The transformed woman heard a good deal of the blonde shinobi, and while she was no slouch as a fighter, she had made sure to avoid combat since she was not much of a fighter to begin with and lacked actual combat experience. She had to leave the situation before her and escape, even if losing the money she needed was the price tag. Naruto could tell that she was not liking the possible outcome of fighting him like this, and he decided to try and find out more of this literal catgirl before him. You know, physical abilities aside, you don't exactly strike me as a serious fighter. Which means either you don't have field experience or you were not a fighter until recently. Point being that it is confusing me on why you want to pick a fight. This is not going to end well for you, so I suggest you give this up. Cheetah bared her teeth at that and replied. Never. You could never understand me. The two finally broke away and Cheetah was not wasting time as she quickly grabbed a nearby desk and turned it into an impromptu club to bash Naruto's head in. Naruto quickly drew his sword and channeled his chakra into the sword to cut the desk in half, and then used it to cut another weapon taken by the humanoid feline, this time a long lamp, to make into a staff. However, the metal, while hard and strong, was not meant to take on metal enhanced by chakra, and soon the weapon was cut. This, however, did not deter Cheetah as she lunged at Naruto. Normally Naruto would have used his sword to kill a foe like this if the situation became desperate, and in a sense this one was a desperate situation. But his senses, namely the kind that he got from Kurama, were alerted by something. That something was coming from the woman before him, her emotions. Despair. Desperation. Self-loathing. Guilt. Hope. All of this was in the woman, and seemed to be the driving force to make her go for money, and the fact that she was willing to fight him like this even when it was clear that he was in a sense a better fighter since he was battle-hardened and she, while certainly no slouch, had not fought to kill for some reason or another. This only served to make him all the more determined to find out just who she was. But before it could come to that, the sounds of sirens came and the catgirl showed an expression of dismay, no doubt realizing that while she could tangle with the cops, fighting both them and the Hokage was not going to end well at all for her. She glared at him and left. Naruto, however, did not let her leave without him trying to find out more about this person before him. He left a pair of cage bunshin to tend to the wounded while he went after the catgirl. Her unique chakra signature did take him some getting used to, while tracking her was a bit harder. Still, once he got to the roof of the buildings and began to move around his way, it did not take long for him to spot her. He moved quickly, tossed a Hiroshin kunai at the ground before her. The weapon forced her to stop and turn around. Seeing nothing, Cheetah turned to continued running, thinking that Naruto missed. Only for him to be right in front of her, the kunai in question in his hand, and pointed at her. She was shocked by that and managed to ready herself for a fight, though it was obvious that Naruto's sudden appearance before her before she even knew he was there was rather unnerving to her. However, Naruto decided not to attack her directly. Instead, he lowered his kunai and spoke. Why are you here? What? You obviously need money, yet I don't sense any greed in you, more like desperation for something. Cheetah did not say anything, but the way he spoke made her worry on what he was getting at. That is none of your business. It is when you come here and harm innocent people. Now tell me why you are here. Cheetah was not pleased at all by this, and she had no doubt that if she stayed any longer, the company she had once been part of would be after her again. She was not going to let herself be captured by those bastards, never. There was no way she would ever work for and with them again, not after they turned on her. She however placed all thoughts of that aside for the moment and focused on finding some manner of escape route from the blonde shinobi and wondered if seduction could work. The idea was absurd considering her looks, but she knew that if he was able to get to her like this, escape by evasion would be extremely difficult. Fighting was obviously out of the question and his metahuman powers were nothing to sneeze at either. But before she could attempt it, Naruto replied. You know, forgive me for saying this, but you really are different from the one I had to deal with who had the same condition you had. That stopped any thought Cheetah had as she digested just what Naruto had just told her. But before she could say anything else, Naruto spoke once more. I am going to let you go, Cheetah. Don't make me regret that decision. Get out of here now. The female villain looked at him with confusion on her face, but she was not going to let this chance escape her and she decided to turn and leave. But then he spoke once more. I want to know what happened to you before anything else, so let's hope that our next meeting ends on a better note. She turned to speak, only see Naruto disappear, and before she could find him, she had to change her mind since the cops were getting closer. As she did so, she was unaware that Naruto was nearby using his henge to take the look of a simple ventilation shaft, and when she was clear, he broke the henge and then decided to go to the watchtower and see if any of the guys could tell him just who was it that he had just run into. Unfortunately, she was not going to be the only one who was soon going to be someone that Naruto was going to be meeting again soon. In a hidden warehouse. She is here, are you certain? Yes, my lord. The child is here, in this wretched city. Have you found an exact location? No, my lord. The city is rife with energy that interferes with her magical scent. It interferes with our tracing. Nonsense. That crystal should find her scent easily. How can this city be blocking it? We believe that it may have to do with the energy we sensed here before, on numerous occasions. We believe that it may be the reason our ability to track our prey has been hampered. How powerful is this energy? We cannot ascertain that, my lord, but the amounts we have sensed are immense, highly focused and strong. There is a demonic feel about it, yet pure, clean of the things that one associates with evil, almost like a god. Impossible. Such a thing cannot be possible. I wish I can say that you are correct, my lord, but what we have sensed is indeed such a thing. Seek it out then. My lord. Seek this power out along with the child. We shall find a way to return this power into its true form of darkness. And with it and the child, then our power cannot be matched. The figures nodded and soon left, and back in a hidden fortress somewhere in the world, the one they spoke to hidden in the shadows spoke to himself. So, we have yet another power here. Dear Raven, run and hide all you like, but you cannot escape your fate. Your father will rise again and you shall be mine to do with once it is all over. And for you, whatever you are, your power shall benefit the Church of Blood. The Justice League were currently working on dealing with a few new criminals who had decided to pop out of the proverbial woodwork, though there were thankfully not that many as of this time. That usually meant that some of the team members were going to get some time to unwind and relax a bit. One thing they began to agree on after the mess with the Manhunters and the recent mess with the Atlanteans was that the need to rest was needed, since burning themselves out was not that good an option. Only marked exception among them in that train of thought was Batman himself, but he did not stop them if they needed to unwind. As of right now, Superman was pleased to finally get a chance to go out on a simple trip back home to meet his parents, adopted anyway, and relax alongside his cousin Kara. John had gone back to make the most of his time in his old hometown. Flash was back in his city to make sure to keep it safe and also be with his folks. Shara was one of the few who stayed on the watchtower to relax in her own way while Jean was on monitor duty. That, however, would have made one wonder what was going on with several other members of the League, namely a certain blonde shinobi, an Amazon princess, and of course a Tamarinine. If one went into the watchtower, one would get the answer fairly quick. In the watchtower's training gym. The gym basically was like any gym found anywhere on Earth's cities and towns, as well as the private kind. But in this case, the gym equipment here was all custom made, and for a very good reason. When Bruce Wayne, Batman, had the watchtower made, it was made clear that astronauts would need a place to train and hone their bodies and keep themselves physically fit for active duty. After the Imperium invasion and the speech of the general, and prior to introducing the watchtower to the others, he had secretly made custom-built gym equipment and other times brought in, with the last bits in the watchtower when he brought Clark and the others there. He believed that even with the presence of some of the League members having superhuman strength, Superman, Wonder Woman, Jean, and Corey among them, they still needed to keep themselves strong and ready for combat. Naruto personally liked the idea and recalled how as a kid of 12 to 13 he had trained himself in water walking one time by carrying at least 3 to 4 fully grown adult men on his back. When asked by Batman how he managed that, since adult men would weigh a lot more than a 12 or 13-year-old kid in that age, he decided to rip off, just for the fun of it. That's a secret. Complete with hand gestures, smirk, and wink. Needless to say, Batman glared, Superman gave a slight smile. John shook his head. Jean merely observed. Hawkgirl was curious about that. Diana raised an eyebrow. Corey was smiling. And Flash. Laughing his ass off even if Batman was giving him the glare. As for Naruto, he was wearing his trademark fox grin the whole time. Whoever cooked up that line for that character was a genius. He just knew Batman was going to get him for that, but at the moment he did not mind in the slightest. He was actually looking forward to the idea of setting up a prank war with Batman. After all, the prankster from Konoha had to keep in step right. His mother Kushina loved pranks, so who was he to not take up the mantle? Speaking of Corey, she was currently doing something that was considered a part of her people's culture as an empathic but warrior-born race. Sparring. And who was the said partner for said sparring for the orange-skinned, literally fiery-haired, and green-eyed beauty? Who else? Naruto dodged the incoming strike from Corey as they were currently sparring with one another in one of the gyms in the watchtower. The two had been there to get some exercise until the blonde asked the Tamarinine for a spar to see how her combat skills were coming along. She was more than willing to oblige, though he made sure to see her hand-to-hand combat skills and not her energy powers or flight. There was plenty of time for that sort of thing later. And so far he was not disappointed yet, as her speed and power were not to be laughed at, and while she was holding back like he was, she was no slouch when it came to hitting hard. She apparently was well schooled in the combat arts, as he was currently on the defensive, not something he usually took part in. He moved to block another punch from her, which was followed by a kick to his side, but he quickly dodged the kick and fired one of his own, hitting Corey and forcing her backwards. The Tamarinine smiled a bit and quickly engaged the blonde ninja once more, while Naruto smirked at her in reply as he began to block her attacks. After dodging several precise kicks and punches from the woman, Naruto moved on the offensive. He leapt over Corey and then spun in mid-flight to land a powerful kick to her side. Corey managed to block the attack, only for Naruto to use his other leg to hit her from the side, and as soon as he landed on the ground on his hands, he used his hands to springboard himself forward and land a drop kick of his own into Corey's chest. Oof. Corey backed back from the blow but recovered enough to block some of Naruto's punches as he came at her, not relenting in his assault, and soon he hit her with a shoulder charge to get some room. Corey grunted at that but was not disappointed or angry, as she admired her friend's persistence and determination in this fight even if it was a spar between the two of them. She managed to avoid his next blow and land a haymaker of a punch on him, though that said punch was very low-powered. Naruto grunted from the blow and felt his ribs cry in pain, but he did not let that stop him either, as he quickly grabbed Corey's extended arm and caught her in a throw, and as she was sent down to land on the mat, he quickly released her and got some distance between the two of them. That move turned out to be the right move on his part, as she got up with a flip and then charged with a knee strike aimed at his chest, which he blocked, before using her extended leg as a springboard to flip over her, twist in mid-flip and then spinning his body to fire out a kick to her head. A kick that she was able to block and catch the leg and begin to spin the blonde around in a circle. Already the move was really having an effect on the blonde, but he was not going to be idle as he quickly moved forward and attacked even if in such a bad situation. This was naturally part of the training back in the academy. As long as you had your other limbs and the will, strength, and stamina, you are not out of the fight yet. He moved quickly and managed to force Corey to release him as he aimed a punch and elbow strike with his left hand for the fist and the right elbow for the strike. This forced Corey to release his leg, which was an opening that Naruto wasted no time to use as he landed a kick with his other leg to hit Corey, and that gave Naruto a chance to get to his feet as Corey did the same. The two looked at one another for a bit longer, tense and ready for a fight. Until they smiled at one another. They had agreed to have the spar last for 5 minutes, and now that they had reached the limit, it was time to stop. Not that neither of them were disappointed for not winning the spar between them. As they relaxed, they soon heard clapping nearby and turned to see none other than Diana herself. That was impressive, Hokage, Starfire. Diana's praise was not false in any stretch of the imagination, as she had arrived much earlier and had decided to observe the two spar with one another. She had noted that Naruto's style was flexible, unpredictable, but highly effective and also precise when he attacked Corey in the spar. The fight lasted for a bit and there was no doubt in her warrior's eye that Naruto was no slouch in fighting powerful foes. Both Corey and Naruto smiled, and the blonde showed the traditional sign of respect between ninja students, and since Corey had been told by the blonde what the gesture meant, she did likewise, and when it was over she spoke to him. That was a really good spar, friend Hokage. Thanks, you are no slouch yourself, Corey-chan. I take it this kind of thing is common for you. Corey smiled and nodded. Yes, I was trained well back home. It's common on Tamarin for us to learn how to fight to defend ourselves. Corey's smile did not hide any sadness, not because she had forgotten her homeworld, but because she knew that as long as she was not seen and caught by the Citadel, her people would not be attacked and harmed, thus as long as they were all right, then she would be all right. And the fact that she had found good friends here on Earth made the separation much easier to bear, along with being close to friend Naruto, the very first person she had become close to ever since her escape. Naruto smiled at that and knew that at least Kori's spirits were good and he had no plans to let anything take away her smile and her spark. Even though it was a constant struggle for him not to do anything towards Kori, even though it was obvious that Kori was not against doing anything with him right now. Good to know, and I have to admit that if you were able to come to my own world before, you would have become quite famous as a kunoichi Kori-chan. Kori smiled warmly at the praise coming from her first friend on Earth itself, and Diana could see that Naruto himself was a good friend to Kori. The young princess had taken to being part of the league well enough, and despite her being naive in the culture on Earth, had proven that her heart was in the right place, and in hindsight reminded the Amazon of herself on occasion and also reminded her of Donna, her very own sister. I also would agree, Kori, you have amazing combat skill, and with more time and experience, you can truly make a difference alongside your powers. Kori nodded, and Naruto smiled at the fact that Diana and Kori got along rather well. He, however, had to admit seeing both beautiful women in their respective uniforms and chatting like that gave some very interesting images to him. He managed to place those thoughts aside, since the last thing he wanted was for any of them to catch him having less than impure thoughts, even if he was a shameless pervert on occasion. The reason was that while he had a feeling that Kori did not mind and in fact would revel in that due to her culture, nature, and habits, Diana, despite being on good terms with him, would murder his ass if she found out just where his thoughts were going. Diana soon faced him and smiled her approval of his performance. And you are very well skilled, Hokage. The style you used was highly flexible and unpredictable. Plus you seem to find ways to attack Kori in the most unexpected and acrobatic ways. Naruto smiled and accepted the praise, coming from Diana, who was the princess of a nation of nigh immortal warrior women who had more time than he did to learn how to fight. That was a lot. Yeah, well, I always try to keep myself in top form even if I happen to be a lot older than most guys my physical age might suggest. At any rate, it's kind of nice to be able to spar with someone who can give me a challenge. Oh. Yeah, not that I want it or anything, but the vast majority of the criminals I have to deal with in LA, guns and weapons aside, don't strike me as being that big a threat. I mean, take away the guns and have them land in my world, they'd be in for a world of hurt. The criminal ninja back home were a lot more dangerous than them, and I honestly wish I took the chance to spar with Superman. Diana smirked a bit at that and spoke again. You would spar with Superman? Yeah, I would. He's not as refined in the martial arts, but that can be remedied with some extra training time. I missed him though, but Kori-chan really made me work for it there, so I am happy to bleed out the boredom. Plus I am going to teach her some of the taijutsu skills I picked up. Not really my chosen skill set and all that, but I am good at it. I can see that. So why don't I propose a match? Oh, who am I to spar with? He just had to ask, huh? Later. Me and my big mouth. No kidding, but then again, they don't seem to mind. The reason for Naruto to have that said thought run through his brain, along with the sarcastic comment from Kurama. He was now being tag-teamed by both Diana and Kori as the Amazon, and the Tamarinine decided to test Naruto's combat skills against two powerful female fighters, with the condition that if he could hit either of them hard enough to cause an injury, then the match was over with him as the victor, and if he got injured by either of them hard enough to stop his offensive but not seriously harm him, then they would be the winners. And right now they were really giving him a run for his money, as both were not going to let him get away that easily. It was hardly with any malice though, since they were pretty much eager to test themselves against Naruto, who had proven thus far to be someone who could be a test for them both. So right now, the blonde former Hokage was being attacked by the two women who were really cutting loose in the fight, but not enough to send him to hospital, thankfully. He dodged a powerful punch and elbow strike combination from Diana and then blocked a powerful side kick from Kori, who followed up with a knee strike of her own, forcing him to counter with his own leg to block the attack and move it aside. He had little time to relax as he flipped backwards and managed to land on his feet and then roll to the side when Diana came in with a powerful bone-crushing heel kick. The metal where he'd been standing on before was now crushed. Diana grunted a bit in missing her target, but that hardly meant she was done, as she quickly turned to him and fired a two-punch combination which he blocked, and she soon followed that with a spinning kick that forced him to duck and then block another kick from Kori, who was now throwing punches at him, and followed by what appeared to be a drop kick from one of those wrestling shows he and Kori had seen by accident. He managed to counter the blows and move back and then thought to himself. Not exactly what I had in mind, but this is really getting rid of the boredom. The two women were soon ready to engage him again, and he was also more than ready for the coming attacks, though he had to admit that whoever was bankrolling the watchtower was going to have a hissy fit if the damage to the gym was any indication. One thing was for sure, sparring with Coriander and Diana at the same time was pretty darn exhilarating. The implications of his own statement plus the images it sent into him quickly made him wish that he had not thought it up. Thank the kami neither of them were telepathic, otherwise they would have been able to pick up on the thoughts in his head. And usually would have been one hell of a mess on his part, since he would have to convince the two that he had no ungentlemanly ideas towards them. Kurama on the other hand was more than willing to take advantage of the situation he was in for the sake of humor. And how was he going to take advantage of the whole thing, one might ask? Simply put, he began to send images into Naruto's mind which showed him fighting the Amazon and Tamarinine, only this time they were very much bare of any clothing, the very same images that had briefly been in his partner's head. Ooh, kinky, being tag-teamed by two gorgeous women who can knock your block off literally in the nude. Hey, you're a real piece of work, Naruto. No thanks to you, furball. Knock it off, I do not need those images in my head right now. Sorry, having I too much fun? Oh, duck. Naruto did just that to avoid a hell of a kick directed at his head by Diana, and while he did evade the blow, the way he moved back and the fact that Diana was still kicking at him, he got an interesting look at the raven-haired and blue-eyed beauty in that angle, only adding to his flustered state. A state further increased when Cory came at him with a shoulder charge that he barely flipped over, and when she turned to be ready for his landing, he got a very interesting view from above as he was at the apex of his flip over the Tamarinine. Naruto mentally got his head back in the match and out of the gutter as he was soon blocking a fist from Cory and another kick from Diana at the same time. He quickly pushed their attacks aside and quickly launched a combined attack of his own this time around. The blonde finally decided to use some of his chakra to help him increase his durability a bit more before he would use his abilities to engage in close combat again with the two females who were really making things difficult for him. He personally did not want to resort to using his chakra in a spar, but if there was one thing he learned in his years as Hokage, it was that fighting fair was a foreign concept to ninja, and if needed, he would have to fight dirty to win. He knew that this was a bit overkill, but if this kept up, he was going to have to go all out anyway. The fact that Diana decided to amp things up with her asking him to use his chakra in the match made this a lot easier. Hokage, use your chakra in this fight, I want to see how you use it. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that while blocking a punch from Diana while Cory moved into attack with a kick of her own, to which Naruto flipped backward to avoid the attack. Normally Diana would have preferred to fight Naruto one-on-one from the beginning, but she wanted to give the blonde a challenge since he wanted one, plus she liked Cory as a friend and ally, so this did not bother her. However, she decided that next time it would be just her and Naruto in a spar. Naruto did not know what was going on in the mind of the raven-haired warrior princess and spoke to her. You want me to use my chakra in this spar? Of course. Besides, Batman stated that the room is reinforced along with whatever equipment is here right now. Go all out for now, Hokage. I want to see you show your power. Cory was more than willing to support the idea as she spoke to Naruto. Yes, friend Naruto, we can handle it. Naruto could tell that both Diana and Cory were very serious about their suggestion and decided to do what they asked since he had already used his chakra to increase his durability a bit. The blonde soon felt his chakra flow through him and the two women moved together to test him with another set of combined attacks from the two of them. Diana attacked with a rising kick to the head of the blonde, and when Naruto blocked the attack with his arm, she moved to strike with a punch to his chest. Naruto countered by Naruto as he flipped over Diana, using his chakra to actually stick to Diana as he grabbed her shoulder with one hand, used his foot to move Cory's punch to block her attack. He then landed behind Diana, who turned to attack him with a backhand strike to hit him. He quickly dodged the attack and landed a full palm strike into the woman's torso with his chakra, increasing the power of the strike. Diana grunted from the impact as Naruto quickly ducked the incoming kick from Cory and then moved to using his chakra to increase his speed a bit and managed to avoid two more strikes from the Tamarinine as he managed to move into the air and land a powerful dropping axe kick that she blocked with both her arms. The blow had a good deal of power as the metal floor depressed a bit as Naruto moved to using his chakra to stick to her as he moved to grab her shoulders. This allowed him to have some traction as he got behind her to suddenly move down to throw Cory back to land on the ground. Naruto quickly turned to evade several attacks from Diana, who grunted a bit at his evasion of her attacks, and he quickly ducked a punch and used a sweep kick to force her back, which he used to launch himself at her to fire a kick at Diana which she blocked with her own arm. She was about to counter-attack, but he quickly launched a punch that she evaded and managed to kick Naruto hard in the chest. Naruto groaned at the impact but landed on his feet and had to admit that the blow was pretty strong. But he got up and readied himself on the off chance he had to fight again, though it was clear that the fight was over as Cory and Diana began to relax a bit. Diana wondered if Naruto had used the full potential of his chakra in this fight, as she had felt something coming from him that was somehow connecting to her skin. But she decided to put an end to this fight. It seems that the fight is in the favor of both myself and Cory, Hokage. Naruto grunted a bit but he grinned, making Diana wonder why he was making such an expression. And Naruto spoke to the Amazon with the grin on his face while rubbing the area she had hit him. I have to admit that the blow you gave hurt me, Diana Heim, but that hardly means that I wasn't able to get a hit on you that can be considered a serious blow. Cory looked at Diana and pointed at her arm. Friend Diana, look at your arm. She did so and saw that there was a cut there and a bruise as well, proof that the blow Naruto had used was a lot more powerful than she had expected. She had to admit that the battle had been so intense that she had not noticed the blow. She looked at Naruto, who was rubbing the area where he had been hit, while smiling a bit, and she gave him a nod of approval. It seems that the contest did not come with a victor, as we both injured one another. I guess the match is a draw. Naruto nodded and replied with a rueful look. Yeah, but damn, you can really pack a hell of a hit, Diana Heim. Still, it was an amazing fight. If you ever came to my home world, I can easily bet you would make a name for yourself as a kunoichi. Diana smiled as she checked her arm where the cut and slight bruise was. Already her wounds healed at a good clip due to her inherent healing abilities. Normally, being wounded by a man was a bad thing for an Amazon, but Diana had developed a level of respect for Naruto and his skills were quite respectable. And the fact that he had grown up in a world where women were not only free to pursue their own interests but have earned great renown and even led forces in battle as well as fight in battle made her respect him a lot more. She knew that there might be some secrets Naruto may have, but then again the same could be said for her as well. She had not yet told the others that she had left her homeland without permission from her mother the queen, and no doubt she had made her people worry greatly due to her being gone. She mentally gave a sigh and hoped that she could be able to come back home and be able to mend fences with her mother and her sisters when the time came. She turned to see Naruto looking at her wound intently, and she wondered what he was doing until he spoke. That wound still hurting, Diana Heim? A little, but I am healing well enough. I can speed it up if you want. Diana was surprised, and so was Cory, and she was more than willing to ask how he planned to do that. How? Naruto sighed and began to summon his chakra, and soon a glowing nimbus of green chakra came out from his hands, and soon he moved to the scar. Diana was curious and was a bit surprised when she felt the chakra hit her wound, and it was not because it was bad to her senses. Instead, it actually felt warm, gentle and calming to her, and she actually felt her flesh mend. Naruto soon moved his hands away, and she saw that any trace of the wound was all gone as the glowing chakra faded from Naruto's hands. Cory was wide-eyed as Diana was as she flexed her arm and could see that what happened was no illusion at all, her arm was indeed fully healed. Soon Naruto grinned a bit as he saw their reaction. While he was hardly a fully skilled medic nin, nor was he the caliber of say Sakura and Tsunade, nor did he have the skills of Hinata, he had learned enough on how to use healing chakra to deal with most wounds. But he usually let the real healers do the work, since he did have his highly potent life force for he healing bit along with Kurama's own potent chakra reserves to speed up the whole thing so they could use their talents on those who needed it. Plus he was not a full-fledged medic nin and thus did not have the higher level knowledge of full medic nin. Still, having the skills certainly helped, and he was not the kind to forget anything that can spell the difference between victory or defeat. And Diana approved as she spoke. Impressive. I did not know you were skilled as healer. If I recall it right, you mentioned that there were ninja who were healers, medic nin. Yep. I'm not a full-fledged medic nin and thus I don't have the full skill set along with the other healing and curative techniques, but I at least have enough skills and experience to heal basic and some serious wounds. Diana nodded in approval at that, as such a talent set was invaluable in her mind. She was all the more curious and asked more pointed questions about chakra, and she was not the only one, as Cory was also very curious. In truth though, the line of conversation quickly made Naruto realize a few things. While it was true that he could sense chakra in the others, he noted a large amount differences in their unique chakra types as well. Superman Clark Kent's chakra was different, and so were that of the others, no doubt due to being an alien and reliant on solar radiation from the sun of Earth, though he did wonder why red sun radiation, whatever the hell that was, had the reverse effect on his powers. The others who had very unusual chakra, being that they were alien, were obviously Coriander, Shara, and Jean, with differences between the three. In fact, the only ones who were human were Green Lantern, Batman, and Flash, though Flash had a slightly higher chakra pool compared to the two, which was possibly due to his accident that gave him powers. But he noted something odd about Diana's own chakra type. He had not gotten into serious details about it for now, since he had other matters to deal with. But now that he thought about it, he had sensed for some reason that Diana's chakra was like a fusion of normal chakra for living humans, and nature chakra. That was surprising to him, since the only times he had ever felt nature chakra in living beings were when he was in Sennin mode and when he tangled with the 10 tails. The fact that Diana had it in a very unique variant and amount of said nature chakra was also rather interesting to the blonde, as he had never felt this variant before. And it seemed to be part of her body's own network without draining easily and also be utterly harmless to Diana. In fact, it seemed that this unique chakra was more beneficial to the princess in more ways than merely one. In fact, if he was to wager a guess, it might have to do with her healing ability, and it might mean that Diana's Amazons could have that same unique connection. That was more confusing to him, since as far as he knew, no one practiced chakra here, and even if there was the possibility that the Amazons had some knowledge on it as well as some way to train their sisters on how to harness nature chakra, then it would have made sense for Diana to have used it ever since she came here. The fact that she had not shown any signs of a user of nature chakra made him very curious how it was possible. It also made him wonder what would happen if she did get the training on how to use chakra. Sure, she was not exactly at the right age like he was in the academy, but that unique chakra she had seemed to tell him otherwise. But that can wait. Now is not the time to think on this until I get to sample the nature chakra from her homeland. Whatever it is and how come she has an amount of it in her body naturally. The three of them continued the discussion with Diana and Corey unaware of his thoughts for the moment, and once they were done Diana decided to go and help with monitor duty. This naturally left Naruto alone with Corey. The two of them parted company, and as Naruto and Coriander headed to take some food to eat after the spar, she decided to ask him if they could visit this place called the Beverly Center in LA, which she heard about and was interested to see as she had not been to one yet. Naturally, Naruto knew just what she was referring to and decided to do so. It was high time she got to be a regular woman having a day off from work. Though it would be plainly obvious that the definition of work between them would be very different from what normal people did for a living. Later in LA. Naruto sighed a bit as he was using his henge to disguise himself, at least in terms of face, so he did not have his whisker marks. His eyes were now deep violet and had made his normally spiky hair go down and be in a ponytail while accompanying a disguised Corey around the city on what was her newest outing. Sure, no one knew he was Hokage, but he was not taking chances at this point and time. Corey had taken some time to convince to not go out in her hero outfit, and after some time, she finally consented to his request for her to be dressed. She finally decided wear simple clothing for this little excursion, which included a simple long-sleeved white shirt and comfortable jeans along with shoes, but like before, even regular civilian clothing looked so damn enticing on the beautiful Tamarinine that it seemed almost pointless to try and hide her. And of course there was the fact that Corey being comfortable in her skin, despite agreeing to his request, was none too happy in being forced to wear clothing, but apparently her desire to learn more of Earth alongside Naruto was enough to make her agree to it. And it seemed that clothes were comfortable enough for her to accept them even more, which was a hell of a lot better than her regular outfit. And already there was a lot of eyes at Corey, mostly the male kind and even some female kind, to which Naruto could not help but snicker at mentally to himself. Though to be perfectly honest with himself, he was just as guilty as the men were for staring at Corey. Only difference was, he had seen her naked more times than most. And he was sorely tempted to rub it in on more than one instance that he was the only guy thus far she was willing to go in the nude for in his own house. But he decided not to. That was asking for trouble in more ways than one. At the moment, they were walking towards one of the known malls in Los Angeles, as she had wanted to see the place after seeing it on TV, and already her appearance was attracting all manner of attention, benign or malevolent. More than one person took pictures of Corey. Men stared or rather ogled, women were jealously looking at her and giving their boyfriends, and husbands the proverbial evil eye, and women who were into women, or both women and men, looked at her with great interest. None of which mattered much to Corey at the moment, as she was focused on looking at all she can see. Naruto was not far behind, as some of the women were looking at him in interest, men were looking at him in annoyance due to the fact that their female companions were looking at him, and men who were more into men looked at him as well, much to his annoyance. Thankfully no one had tried to get into their personal space just yet, since he was not in the mood to get into a confrontation on his date with Corey. But he was no fool either and knew that sooner or later, someone was going to try something very soon. But considering what he could do and what Corey could do when she was angry, and boy what a terrifying sight an enraged Starfire was, he couldn't help but feel that whoever did get on Corey's nerves to the point she lost her temper was either had balls of titanium, or had little to no regard for his own well-being. The Tamarinine beauty soon went to what appeared to an ice cream shop and looked at the various flavors. Naruto, having tasted cold treat kid growing up, enjoyed a treat like that every now and then. Though prior to the villagers and ninja changing their views on him were usually either locking their doors to him, or raising the prices high enough that he could not buy any of them, unlike Iruka was with him, or in the days prior to his death, Jiraiya. It was a different matter outside of Konoha though, so he enjoyed outings when he got ice cream. Here in this world, on the other hand, it was obviously a far different matter altogether, and he had tried a number of flavors that he liked. He saw Corey look at one batch of ice cream and silently prayed that his wallet would survive this. Hours later. And there goes half the month's accumulated salary. Man, now once more I know how Iruka-sensei feels every time he treated me out to ramen. But once he moved from looking at his now empty wallet to looking to see a blissfully happy Corey enjoying her fourth of 7 pizzas along with 3 nice orange ice slushy, made him rethink the feeling on his mind. Oh well, at least it was for a good cause. What was the reason for said thought coming from the blonde? Starfire had bought a number of things, namely clothing and a few other items that cost him a fairly hefty sum, coupled with the other things she bought since she found them interesting. That was not counting the fact that he had to spend a fairly hefty sum for the ice cream that she ate, along with having to tolerate a large number of males who looked perversely at Corey licking her ice cream, not doubt imagining who knew what in their heads. Not that he was not guilty of that himself, but at least he was able to control himself and had respect for Corey as he knew her story, and while she was more open with him, he knew it was only because he never took advantage of her. The day he took advantage of a woman was the day he would willingly allow himself to be killed by his enemies. It seemed that regardless of race or, in his case, dimension, shopping was hardwired into the mindset of women, either for comfort, or fashion, or both. Of course there were marked exceptions to that rule in his mind. Tenten-chan always preferring buying the latest weapons off the blacksmith than clothing considering all those weapon scrolls she had on her when I met her in the past. She always bought only clothes she felt comfortable with and only bought dresses for special occasions. He smiled slightly in memory of his long-deceased fellow Konoha ninja and wondered just what she was doing now in the afterlife. He was so deep in thought on the matter that he had not noticed the look of concern coming from Kori until she touched him on the face. "Are you all right, friend Naruto?" That woke him up from his current trip down memory lane and his eyes widened on the fact that Kori had said his real name in public. He quickly looked about and was slightly pleased by the fact that no one was taken keen-eared to have heard his name. Granted he wore a mask when being in his Hokage persona, but he was not keen on the idea of anyone figuring him out to be Hokage since it was already made aware that he was usually with Starfire when they were out on patrol. He was also pleased that at least the people were making a lot of noise so unless one of them had some serious equipment to pick up voices then he was in the clear. He turned to face Kori and spoke. "I am fine Kori-chan, but you know you're not supposed to use my real name when out in public remember?" "Oh, sorry. I forgot, but you were so quiet and I tried to call your attention, you did not respond so I was worried. On to Marin, we are fairly open about talking about many things, so may I ask what troubles you and if I can help you?" Naruto smiled at that and replied. "No worries, just thinking about my old friends, they are long gone now." Kori gave a small nod and replied. "I see, I am sorry for you." But she smiled and hugged him, unmindful of the fact that her doing so got groans of dismay and growls of anger from the men, and some from the women. Naruto on the other hand could not help but smile at her very friendly nature and he could tell that her sudden show of affection was genuine and at least no one had done anything that could be considered hostile to the two of them. Kori soon moved away and spoke to him earnestly. "But I promise to be as good a friend to you as long as we are together." Naruto smiled at that and soon they decided to get back to enjoying their little vacation. However, to their surprise, the crowds near them began to run away and scream. Briefly Naruto wondered if there was a sudden attack but when he reached out with some of Kurama's chakra, he sensed none of the emotions that would denote an attack and people in danger. In fact, it was the exact polar opposite. They were happy and surprised, along with the usual emotions men had when seeing a woman who was drop dead gorgeous. Naturally there were darker reactions from the ladies and he wondered if a celebrity had just arrived so he moved his chakra senses a bit further out to determine who it was. The very second he felt the chakra of the person the rest of them all were looking at, he was surprised. "She's here." Kurama also sensed that and inside his partner's mindscape, the nine-tailed fox smirked in his own way and spoke. "Oh yeah, this just got interesting." The very second the crowd parted, the arrival turned out to be none other than Diana of the Myskria, or rather Wonder Woman. The blonde had no idea just what she was doing here, and how she found them, but he knew better than to complain for the time being as the Amazon beauty looked around, unmindful of all the looks being sent at her direction, though acknowledging to some extent the looks of desire from women who naturally in this case were more into women than men, though the blonde had no doubt there were women who were into both men and women admiring her. Kori turned and smiled warmly and without bothering to control herself, quickly flew towards Diana and landed there and hugged the raven-haired and blue-eyed Amazon beauty. Diana could tell the genuine happiness in the hug that Kori gave her and responded in kind to her actions as she hugged the Tamarinine princess in exile back. As soon as the hug ended, the Tamarinine was busy chatting away with her fellow Justice League member, and already the stares directed at the two beauties were getting a lot more intense. The reason being that Diana did not wear any form of disguise at all so she was in her full gear which was pretty darn distracting, though compared to seeing her and Kori in both their uniforms would have made the image of the two beauties hugging on another tame. As soon as they parted from one another, the two walked back and Diana knew that this was Naruto in what he called his hench. And she knew that since Naruto had a secret identity that only the others in the league knew about, she was not going to reveal that identity to the public. The public only knew him as the Hokage, but not as Naruto Uzumaki and she respected that. "Greetings, happy to see you here Hokage." Naruto nodded at that and replied in kind. "Nice to see you as well Wonder Woman, what brings you here to Los Angeles?" "I figured seeing the city that you and Starfire protect when not in the league was in order since I have to confess that staying in the watchtower was getting to rather dull. I hope you and Starfire do not mind my presence here." Naruto had no reason why he would not like her being here, and neither would Starfire as she spoke with a happy tone her voice as she was looking forward to having company with them here and Diana being said company was more than welcome. Kori being the more vocal and open-hearted one of the bunch replied. "It would be glorious to have you with us friend Wonder Woman." Naruto shrugged and nodded in approval while smiling. Inside himself however, he could not help but feel like he was going to be in for another round of shopping. Thankfully he did always carry a spare envelope of money on his person, hidden away from sight. He only hoped that Diana did not have a shopping bug like Kori did. Thank the kami that she is not as bad as Kori-chan. Naruto's relief was evident as Diana had only bought a small number of clothes that appealed to her, which was pretty interesting since the clothing was not native to her. She did not go to the cosmetics section, which was a good thing to the blonde for two reasons. The first was that some of the stuff being sold there cost a lot. And the second was the fact that she did not look like she needed to have any form of makeup and the like, since she was gifted well with natural beauty. Any attempt to have her wear any of that stuff felt like it was both redundant and useless to his view, and apparently the same went for the Amazon herself, since she found no reason for her to have them in her purchases. Heck, she even asked him why women would wear this to hide their beauty. Thankfully, having been married before his arrival here, and having taken care of his own daughters who had gotten married, he was able to answer her instead of acting like the proverbial deer caught in the headlights. Well, not every woman is born with perfect features like you, so they use these to attract a man. Why would they do that? It's something that happens a lot here than in Themyscira Wonder Woman, so it's considered natural here, and since men and women do have children here in man's world, it's what one would expect. Is all of this to attract men necessary? Depends on the viewpoint of the woman, I guess. It's best to not forget that not all men are as bad as you might have heard, and there are women who can be considered bad or worse as well. Humanity is a mixed bag of people, so it's best to learn to look at all things on both sides than just one. I see. Naruto grinned and replied. And besides, you've already met a number of men already that can show you that not all men are like those your tutors describe. That was not going to be the end of the conversation in his view, since Diana was still getting used to living in the world where men were as plentiful as women. And no doubt she would hold on to her trained cultural views, but if there was one thing he learned in his long years of being alive, times and things can change. Diana would soon learn that while some of the things her mentors taught her about men were true, not everything was true, and that at times, women can be just as dangerous or worse than the men. But that could wait for now, as they were still making the most of the day before them. An interesting factor in this new and unexpected shopping trip was the fact that a lot of the people manning the places that the Amazon had bought in were willing to lower prices due to the fact that they were dealing with Wonder Woman of the Justice League, and did the same for Starfire. They also did the same to a lesser extent to him, though it was obvious that the ladies were the ones getting the better treatment. Not that it bothered him that much, though he was very sure that he was going to have to work double time for getting his cash reserves back into good shape. The good thing at least was that no one was. Don't finish that train of thought, Kit. You know what happens whenever you think that. Naruto mentally groaned at that as he recalled that whenever he thought things would not get any worse, they usually did. Unfortunately, his worries were realized when the three heroes of the League heard shouting and panicking nearby. Naruto quickly used his Senjutsu chakra to try and find out just what was going on, and soon felt an undercurrent of panic. He soon sensed 6 signatures of people with hostile intent in the mall, and he quickly turned to the 2 superheroines. We got trouble. Come on. The 2 nodded, and despite the fact she was wearing civilian clothes, Corey took to the air alongside Diana as Naruto quickly moved forward to get somewhere safe to change clothing right away. He carried a spare set of his Hokage clothing and armor in a seal scroll, and he was going to find a place to get into gear. He wanted to avoid the cameras in the place, since the last thing he wanted was to have his mug without the mask all over the place, even if he was in hench. Thankfully no one was going to stop him as he quickly got into an area not easily watched by the cameras and quickly got dressed. He soon donned his full armor and mask, moved back to join the 2 female heroes to find out what was going. They did not have to wait long to get their answer on what was going on. Before them happened to be a large number of armed thugs, carrying assault rifles and hoods. The way these guys moved showed that they were not regular hoods. And the fact that they got body armor on only made that fact a lot more apparent than most, and he would have to go all out. But he had a feeling that this was not going to go the way the gang envisioned their little robbery attempt. And it was. The very second one of the thugs turned at their direction, Corey came in and landed one hell of a flying kick to send the man flying backwards. One of the guys armed with a shotgun turned to shoot at Corey, only for Diana to come in with her lasso to hold him down and yanked him towards her, for her to land a real haymaker on his face. Cowards. Fight with honor. Diana obviously was not keen on fighting people who used what she felt was cowardly weapons, but at least she was aware not to take chances as the thugs turned to shoot at her. She used the bullets and bracers bit and sent the bullets away as he came to her side. Wonder Woman, we need to make sure those bullets don't go flying about and hit innocent bystanders. Understood. Diana did just that as she sent the bullets away in different angles that made sure to avoid civilians, while Naruto quickly took out a spare of shuriken and tossed them into the guns of 2 other thugs, causing them to jam up on contact. That was the opening he needed as he charged in and quickly landed a punch and kick combination to the 2 before leaping upwards to land a combined kick to their faces and using their falling bodies as springboards to leap over another shooter, and then kicked him to his knees before landing a knee strike of his own into the face to send the guy out. Another thug shouted as he turned to shoot Naruto. Die, you freak. That however enraged a certain Tamarine beauty as she charged in and then took the gun from the man. And before his eyes she broke it into nothing but useless halves. Do not dare call my friend a freak. The man saw the enraged look on the beauty's face and nigh pissed himself when she summoned her energy and landed a fist to his face. Thankfully his head did not blow up like a rotten melon on impact. But it was a fact that he was going to be drinking from a straw for the next few months. The guy was out like a light and soon the three faced the thugs as Naruto drew his sword and had a kunai at the ready. Diana cracked her knuckles a bit and readied her lasso while Cory charged up a pair of powerful green starbolts at the ready. The thugs, realizing how outmatched they were, did the only thing reasonable. They dropped their guns. Later, Naruto sighed as he, Diana, and Cory watched the thugs being dragged off to be arrested, and soon the police got the sworn statements of the witnesses and the 3 league members in question. He was not pleased by the outcome of the whole day, but at least he was pleased that no one had been hurt, and when things seemed to calm down, he faced both Diana and Coriander. Sorry about this, the whole day was ruined. Cory shook her head and replied with a warm smile on her face. No worries about that, one friend Hokage, I enjoyed this day immensely. Diana also nodded and spoke to the blonde ninja. I am not disappointed, this was an interesting experience, at any rate, I should head back, it's my turn to take over for Jean after all. I'll make sure to store these away. They bid Diana farewell and soon the two headed off on their own, unaware that they had observers on the two of them as well as Diana. And the observers belonged to 3 different groups and neither of them were aware of one another. Naruto would have sensed them and their intent had it not been for 2 things. One, he was busy being pestered by the media again. And the second was after he finally convinced them to leave, Cory dropped a message to him. Apparently someone from one of the clothing brand stores in the mall had decided to take the initiative and she asked you to be a model. Yes, friend Hokage. Isn't that exciting? In what appeared to be a large hotel complex in LA. Slow down, Cory. Sorry, friend Alex, I just do not want to be late for this meeting. The Hokage was currently using once more his henge to take a far different facial appearance while retaining the blonde hair he knew would be the indicator of him being the Hokage. But with his face different from his actual face, not many would recognize him quickly enough even if no one had actually seen his real mug. It sounded redundant, but Naruto had not made it this far in his life as a shinobi without having plans that would pop into his head and be ready for use when needed. Naruto had no idea how he got himself to be dragged here to this place where Cory was supposed to go for her first stint as a model, but here he was now, so he might as well suck it up. Besides, he could not ever find it in himself to say no, especially when Cory subconsciously used the sad puppy dog eyes move even if he was certain he never taught her that. He was willing to wager a guess she might have seen it somewhere in one of those TV shows she took an interest in recently. The only thing he could take comfort in at this point was the fact that she was using the new cover name he gave her, well, even though she obviously did not like using that and not his real name. Apparently whoever the person was that managed to get Cory to work as a model decided to have her work with a mentor, namely a female model who had been in the business a lot longer than most, to help her adjust. She was supposed to be here in the meeting place to meet Cory and evaluate her in a photo shoot that would be Cory's first run as a model, and at the moment, no mention of swimsuits being added. That was something of a disappointment to him, but he fought that part down. As soon as they arrived, Cory looked around to see the many people moving around with her eyes looking from person to person in her seeing range. Naruto did likewise, though he was a bit more discreet in his looking since he was making sure that no one was there with ill intentions. He was well aware that models, like most celebrities, had their own share of dangers, from overtly eager fans to obsessed stalkers, so better to be careful. He also was taking a gander at the ladies in this place to be sure, and while there were definitely some attractive faces, they were not that attractive in his view to the ones he was familiar with, namely the ladies he worked with on occasion in the league. Kurama, on the other hand, seemed to have more interesting ideas in mind. Well now, some very beautiful faces and bodies here, fancy new material for your work. Maybe, but right now I want to know who is the mentor of Cory here. So you can get her to bed. Shut up. Yeah, right. Anyway, looks like we're not going to deal with obsessive stalkers and crazed fans or anything today. Which is a good idea, though I am picking up something odd coming from somewhere. You sense it? Naruto mentally agreed. He had begun to pick up some form of energy of sorts nearby. Whatever it was, it seemed primal, not chakra to be sure, but something else entirely. He decided to look around a bit more and hone in on what it was. It was not hostile to be sure, but there was no way that he was going to dismiss something until he was certain of it not being a threat to him or Cory, or anyone in the area. It was not long before Kurama spoke. It's not chakra to be sure, but it is primal energy. I'm guessing it might be similar to the powers used by that woman. Who was that back in Gotham? Ah, the one named Zatanna. Magic, huh? So is it in a person? More like an amulet or charm of sorts, and it's coming closer, right there, Kit. Naruto moved to where the source of the signal was, and when he did home in on the source of the energy signal, he could not help but stare. The object appeared to be a pendant of sorts, a necklace like one of those tribal necklaces he had seen in his research of this world, while having some similarities to some items in his world. But none of that was the reason the blonde shinobi was staring. More to the fact, the reason he was staring was who was the person wearing said necklace. The person in question happened to be a drop-dead gorgeous dark-skinned and dark-haired woman who smiled in his and Corey's direction. Naruto could not help but stare at the ebony-skinned beauty who was now moving in their direction. It wasn't that he was unfamiliar with those whose skin tone was dark or light brown. Most of the shinobi in Kunoichi and Kumo had that skin tone. But this new arrival certainly had the aura of someone who was very capable, and he had a feeling that it was not merely as a model. She had a very lush but strong and well-toned build on her. Her arms were also showing some level of strength, and as he looked closer, he could see that despite the long gloves she wore, she was tall to be sure, though not as tall as others, despite the fact that she did have high heels, and in her current outfit, which was some form of skin-hugging golden yellow suit that had a V there in the middle, which was able to show more of her skin as well as her bust, which was pretty impressive, she was stunning to say the very least. However, he had to admit she did look rather familiar to him, and no, his recognition of the woman in question was not through the reading of magazines, since he had been rather busy as of late to crack open one of those magazines in question. The blonde quickly knew that he had to play his cards right and not look like an ass as Corey greeted the woman. Apparently she was the mentor that Corey had been assigned to. And judging from the smiles on both of their faces, it seemed that Corey and the African woman, as he recalled it right, were getting along rather well. That was a good thing, since Naruto had enough knowledge to know that despite all the glamour and flash, modeling was a tough gig, and he was not in the mood to have someone as impressionable and kind-hearted as Corey being taken advantage of by anyone with less than scrupulous intent on her person. He had enough of those criminal perverts who do that whenever he two of them would show up to stop them when they did something that went against the law. Corey was soon quick to turn back her attention to him and brought him forward to meet her mentor in modeling. "Friend Alex, I would like you to meet my mentor in modeling." Naruto naturally gave the woman a smile, but before they could talk a lot more and allowing him to get a feel of the woman, she turned when one of the people here working with the models and their clothing called to her attention. They were speaking in what appeared to be Italian, a language he could not speak but was familiar with, since some of the employees in Carol's office were from Italian families and would speak to one another in the same language. The woman smiled and spoke to him once they were in an area that was not as populated by the people. "Since you're with Corey, or rather Starfire, I take it you're the Hokage." "Yeah, and let's leave it at that, miss." The woman smirked a bit and replied. Mari Jinwei McCabe at your service." Mari. She certainly looks attractive to be sure, but I still feel like she's familiar to me. "Maybe Naruto, but right now, let's remain focused on finding out more before we make a judgment." "Good to meet you as well, Miss Mari." Mari grinned and then replied. "Wow, pretty polite guy, aren't you? Not what I expected from a superhero of all things." Naruto grinned and replied. "Thanks, though I will admit that you do look familiar to me, not as a model mind you, but someone else." Mari smirked and replied. "Not in a bad way, I hope." "Nope, not at all, but at the moment I still need time to see if I can place your face in my memory on why I know you not as a model. Anyway, it's good to know that Corey's in good hands, since you seem like the trustworthy sort." "Really now, care to tell me why you would think that of me since we only just met?" "Let's just say that I have some unique abilities that allow me to sense if someone has ill intent on me or my companions. And as far as I have sensed, you don't strike me as the kind who has such ill intent. And I have dealt with people who smile on the outside and act all nice, but are cold and rotten to the core on the inside, so I have some danger sense as it were when meeting said people. Not as accurate, but it works, to be honest. Plus, while Corey-chan wears her emotions and heart on a sleeve, she's not that easy to trust people right off the bat, so she must trust you a lot if she is willing to be this friendly with you, Miss Mari." Mari smiled at that and nodded. "I see. No one has ever had anyone show that level of trust to me, so I guess I should prove that I am worthy of such trust, huh?" "Sure. At any rate, may I ask what exactly is going to happen here?" Mari did not hesitate to tell the blonde just what was going to be planned for Corey to use. And so far, it was not that bad, and he was pleased at least that Mari was all right with being Corey's mentor. Plus, despite the still odd energy coming from that necklace, which Naruto had to avoid looking at since its location made him see the exposed areas of Mari's more than well-formed breasts, which did not help him in keeping her perverted side under control, he could not sense any negative intent in her towards Corey. Of course, he was certainly going to have a lot of new material to add to his stories, that much was obvious. Naruto sighed a bit more as he looked at how Corey was handling the business suit bit. He had to admit though that she certainly made a good show in the outfit. He then turned to look at how the rest of the people were handling the fact that they had a gorgeous female alien as a model. Some of the female models were none too happy of Corey, while the others were a bit more supportive and actually liked the young alien woman who was showing off well. Based on one of the pictures of Starfire modeling. So far he could see that Starfire was getting used to the attention, though he noted that she was not too happy with some of the more restrictive clothing. And considering that she wore what was essentially swimwear in public, he could easily see why. But considering the array of clothing that was here, the swimwear bit might very well come in soon enough, and as much as he was trying to play it cool, he was looking forward to that a great deal. And he was not the least bit disappointed, doubly so since it seemed that both Mari and Corey were taking the poolside shoot together. The two were certainly looking good together, and it seemed that Mari was working hard to help Corey get adjusted to this kind of life, and it helped that everyone knew that she had a lot of power in her figure as a fighter. Mari, on the other hand, was hardly the kind one did not look away from. Naruto was pleased to at least know that she was a good person, and apparently, judging by the martial arts build, he could see that mixed well with her modeling figure, she could handle herself. As Corey and Naruto left the photo shoot, they were soon joined by Mari, who invited them to a restaurant, and she was paying for it since she did not often have a protege in the modeling business. And so far Corey was someone that she could call a talented woman, even if by all right she was not a resident native of Earth. After all, when he first appeared, a number of modeling agencies were interested in having Superman model for them in the Kryptonians' off hours. Even after the whole Darkseid incident, there were still some of that going on. Of course, he was also willing to bet that Supergirl herself would have gotten some offers too. Naruto grinned while munching on a bit of steak at that thought. She would have looked real hot. The farmer's daughter look in a bikini. Achoo. Kara Kent shook her head a bit and tried to make sense of why she had suddenly sneezed. As far as she knew, she had never gotten sick in all of her life. You okay? Kara turned to face none other than her close friend Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, as the redhead had come to Smallville on a bit of a road trip, and since they were close friends, she moved to join Kara to relax from her regular life and her other life as Batgirl. And since she was in the know of Kara being a Kryptonian, she had not expected that to happen and was curious. Yeah, but somehow I just sneezed, which is weird since Kryptonians don't get sick from Earth sicknesses. Barbara thought about that and then ventured a guess. Maybe someone was talking about you. Kara raised an eyebrow at that. Naruto decided to end that train of thought since they were now discussing some new projects Corey could try to take part in when she was not on work with Naruto and the League. Any thought on what new projects Corey could take up had to be cut short though when their communicators came online. They excused themselves and Mari did not mind that, wished them luck and hoped they saw one another again. As they left the supermodel to meet up with the rest of the League, however, Naruto and Kurama, well aware now that Mari McCabe was anything but an ordinary if not drop-dead gorgeous model, had a feeling that they would meet her earlier than she might think. In fact, he might as well check up with Batman on what he knew on her. Later. The League were currently getting ready for what would be described as the supersized-up version of a stakeout. The target of said stakeout was an old enemy of Superman, one who Naruto had been told about and had observed before, Lex Luthor, the man who technically built Metropolis from the ground up. But apparently had one hell of an axe to grind with Clark, considering their little war of wills and more had been going on way longer than most would think. So far the plan was going well and they could not help but stay there and listen to Luthor monologue before Superman, who was in reality Jean and thus was immune to kryptonite as he only took the form, not all of Superman's traits. Naruto could not help but shake his head and frown underneath his mask as he looked at the warehouse and listened to the man talk. The whole speech was definitely the traditional villain monologue, and it was tedious to the blonde, though he had to give Luthor credit for doing this for so long without being found out. There were however some things about Lex Luthor that made little sense to the blonde ninja. The most obvious was his long-standing grudge with Superman, which while understandable at first was looking a too excessive in his view. I don't get it. Superman, the real one, turned and spoke. You don't get what, Hokage? Why this Lex has got a serious axe to grind against you. I mean, he pretty much is a self-made man right here, millionaire, captain of industry, efficient, smart to be sure. If he was not a villain and a corrupt bastard, he would have been quite the leading head in his field. Hell, he would have made a good ally if not for his lack of morals, so why is he so dead set on either putting you 6 feet under, or ruining your reputation? Superman had to admit that the question was actually a very valid one, so he decided to answer said question. Ever since I came to Metropolis and started my life as a hero, Lex was on my case. When I met him, it was over his exosuit, which he had covertly sold away while making it look like a theft. The leader of that group that would steal the suit would one day be used by Lex as another means to fight me. He was Metallo, the one you fought against to save my cousin when you came to Metropolis. You mean the cheapskate version of that movie character named the Terminator? I prefer the original version, thank you very much. The guy talked less and was focused on the task. Guy's a chatterbox. Superman chuckled at that and continued. Well, Lex has been after me for quite some time and he has resorted to just about everything to try and take me down. Cloning to make Bizarro, using kryptonite, Metallo's creation, he even resorted to using magic a few times even if he is a firm advocate of science. What do you mean by that? Superman filled Naruto in on what he knew that Lex had done to get ahead and even try to end his life more than once. He did have some scruples, to be fair, but not enough to fully give him a clean slate when it came to the moral and ethical side of things. Naruto took in all the details, and when Superman explained that Lex was angry at the thought of him using his powers to help the common man when he could have easily become a ruler of men. He also mentioned that Lex also disliked the fact that people were more willing to flock to Superman, an alien, than a man who had managed to make his way to the top on his own merits and abilities, never mind the fact that Lex's use of said abilities were anything but benevolent. Naruto took that all in and finally spoke. Okay, at least that cleared it all up for me. What do you mean? I almost thought Chrome Top was gay or something. That made Superman raise an eyebrow. Thought was obvious he was shocked by that kind of statement. You thought Lex was gay? Why? Just a thought. I mean, considering how much he seems to enjoy trying to make your life miserable, I almost thought he was getting sexual gratification out of it for some reason. Superman sighed and tried not to laugh at how Lex would react to such an accusation. Oh, he knew that La was straight as an arrow when it came to his orientation. But he was having a hard time with resisting the image that brought on if someone accused him of that in public. He was actually hoping to record the look with a camera, and who knew how Kara and Lois would react to that accusation. Okay. That's one line of conversation that I think we should end. I agree, sorry about that, looks like we're about to make things interesting for him. Sure enough, the trap was sprung, and to say that Luther was less than amused by what happened would have been the same as saying that skunks smelled. However, the wily businessman managed to make things less than easy for the League and managed to get away, but not without getting hit hard by the blonde ninja, and he swore to get even with Naruto. To which he replied, "Go suck on an egg, Chrome Top." That did not sit well with Lex, to be sure, and no doubt he was going to make sure to get his chance to deal with Naruto soon enough, even though that would have been an odd move since he was not a Metropolis resident. But as things began to heat up and Superman was pursuing Naruto, who was using his chakra to track Luther on the off chance he escaped, sensed a massive amount of pain coming from the man as his chakra suddenly dropped and began to behave very erratically. Superman, on the other hand, did not, and was surprised to see Lex's shuttle go down fast and quickly. He and the others rushed to get to him. Once they got there, seeing his rival and nemesis in pain made Superman to a full stop on any intent to arrest him and take him to hospital. The news that came hours later when Luther was examined was something that Clark did not like one bit. And he wondered just how Luther was going to react. As they left the hospital, Naruto could sense that Superman was really hit hard by this. It showed that despite the less than stellar history between them, Superman was not spiteful towards Lex. In fact, he could easily sense that Superman was every sincere in trying to help Lex, even though Chrome Top was having none of it. In fact, the man stated that Superman had done quite enough for him, and it was clear to the blonde that the statement had enough venom to kill a herd of elephants 3 times over. This reminded him of the time that he had to deal with Mizuki when the insane Chunin, after escaping his prison with his manipulating the stupid brothers Fujin and Raijin, went off to using a highly unstable formula left by Orochimaru to boost his power. Sure, it did just that, but when it wore off and he hit the bastard with a Rasengan, the resulting side effect effectively turned the man into a living husk, and he lost all hope of being a ninja anyway, shape, and form. He was supposed to be a good person to his former fiancée Tsubaki, until Orochimaru got his fangs into his heart, though he wagered a guess that Mizuki was rotten to the core long before hooking up with Orochimaru. And he should have remembered that Orochimaru was not a saint and was more concerned with his goals than the lives of the rest of the villagers and ninja in Konoha. In that sense, he could easily see Mizuki and Lex being the same kind of person, though in hindsight, Mizuki was a bit more of a nut than Lex was, since Lex was smart enough not to get caught until today. As soon as they were a fair distance from the place, he decided to test the waters and speak to Clark. "You all right?" Clark looked at Naruto and sighed a bit as he responded, being able to hear the concern on the blonde's speech. "Not really. Luther may be an enemy of mine, but he does not deserve this fate. I wish I can at least find some way to reverse what happened to him. I know he would not want it, and I know that I can't trust him completely to change." "I understand that. You feel responsible for this, right?" "Yeah." Naruto shook his head at that as they came to where the other members of the League were and spoke. "Well, don't. It sounds harsh to be sure, but Luther brought this on himself the day he began his vendetta against you. I have no doubt that he made the mistake of thinking that just because kryptonite is far more potent against you and your cousin Kara compared to humans like himself, that it would not harm him. He should have recalled that it is a dangerous material to all life. You told me about the time the Joker brought that supposed jade dragon made from kryptonite, remember? Several human owners died when they had it. That fact alone should have told Chrome Top that the thing is dangerous to humans. If anything, he should have kept it in a sealed container to prevent the radiation from getting to him, but his obsession for your demise or fall blinded him to that fact. And now he's paying for it, not you." Batman, who was nearby, had to agree with Naruto's words as they made sense. He had a sliver of kryptonite on his person, but he always kept it in a lead-lined container in his utility belt to keep it from harming him with radiation. That was simply because after that Jade Dragon debacle, he did his research and knew that while the radiation was deadly to Kryptonians like Clark, it was still radiation and could harm others, just not as openly as Clark's people. I agree with Hokage there. Luther should have treated that the same way anything radioactive is to be treated. It's harsh too, but the truth is there and he knows it. Clark frowned and sighed. Maybe, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Corey gave a sad look to Clark, due to her people's empathic nature, and she did respect him for showing compassion even to an avowed enemy. Naruto himself understood where Clark was coming from but decided not to comment on it for a bit more as he allowed Clark time to digest what he and Batman had said until he spoke. True, but only time will tell if he can change his ways. But not to sound too much like a cynic or anything, but I doubt we'll see the last of old Chrome Top. Guys like him, they are not going to give up no matter what, and this is only going to make it worse. Clark looked at the hospital and then to the arriving police officers and spoke solemnly. I wish it was otherwise, but I get the feeling that you may very well be right. And Naruto was right. Lex Luthor knew that in hindsight the game was over. There was no doubt that in a few short months he was going to die. He should have known that the kryptonite was dangerous, but the chance to finally have a major edge over his longtime adversary was too tempting to ignore. He recalled the very first moment he had Superman on his knees with the first shard of kryptonite. Even if that moment had not ended well, the chance to finally have Superman on his knees before him made him feel more powerful than most. That was why he carried it with him at all times, and even more so when he had to work with Joker when Batman and Superman worked together for the very first time. It had been his trump card, and now, it was his death sentence. But no, instead of thinking on what to do with his life, Lex Luthor's mind was engulfed with only one thought in mind: Superman's fall. Though it was not the first time he had those thoughts, the urgency of the fact that he was soon going to die only increased the power of his hatred for Superman. Ever since the day the alien came to Metropolis and was embraced by the people, Luthor had it in for the man. He might have tried to brush it off, but the day Superman cast aside his offer to work for him and doing all of his deeds that made people love him, it enraged Luthor. In his mind, he had worked his ass off to be where he was. He had done all he could to earn every business venture, every dollar and cent he now had, and he had risen through his own hard work, sweat, and brain power. He had also risen above the masses of his own effort and had the desire to prove that he was someone who could surpass everyone else who did not have the ambition, drive, and willingness to risk all. Then this alien with so much power and abilities came in to use it for the common man instead of showing his power and strength overall. All of those advantages, all of that power, potential, everything, wasted on helping the weak and helpless. It galled Luthor and he vowed to one day bring him down. As he thought about it more, he felt the lingering pain and growled. If only that bastard never came here. I will not rest until I see you fall, Superman. It was fairly obvious that Luthor was determined if not more to finally end Superman, but he knew that in order to do that he would need to find some way to stave off the damage that was done to him by the kryptonite poisoning from spreading even more than before in him. But right now he could not help but get angrier as he heard a lot of noise coming from the other side of his cell. And he knew just who it was. Ultra Humanite. Shut that damn garbage up. On the other of the cell, the being in question was quick to speak. Garbage. I'll have you know that this is a very educational and worthwhile display of mass media, Luthor. Shut that thing off or, ag. Luthor clutched his chest once more as the pain hit him hard and he managed to rein in his cries to make sure he did not show weakness. If there was anything that the man hated more than even Superman, it was showing weakness. That made him quiet down and thus did not hear the news of the program that Ultra Humanite was watching was about to be cut short due to lack of funding, something that apparently did not sit well with the being who frowned at that. And there's another good program. Honestly, no one has class anymore. This was the point of the while affair though that Luthor managed to find a way to hack the being's television set. Listen Ultra, I need your help to bust out of here. As much as I loathe asking for help, I am out of options. However, it seemed that his unexpected speaking partner was well aware of his current plight. Ah, I see that your current state from all that kryptonite you carried around is affecting you. And before you ask, I was aware of the fact that you always carry some on your person. I was surprised that you had not taken any precautions to defend yourself. It was radioactive after all. However, I can help you in making it easier to deal with. Lex normally would have told the being to buzz off, but he was not stupid either. He knew that Ultra Humanite was a very intelligent being despite his form and looks apart from being very strong in his own right. How? Well, let us talk business then. You provide me the money to keep my entertainment active, and I provide you the way to keep it at bay. Deal? How do you propose to leave here though? Right after dinner time, which should be right about now. The very second the call came in and they got an idea who had been among the escapees, the League just knew that this was going to be one of those days. No one had any doubt of that more than Clark as he shook his head, knowing that this was not going to end well. He had hoped that this would put an end to Luthor's scheming since he would have focused on using his time to change his ways since death was coming to him. And unlike the number of times that he had gotten out of jail through the contacts he had in law enforcement, bribery, and loopholes in the law, Luther could not do that here since he was pretty much busted. And of course the kryptonite radiation poisoning that he had would make fighting a moot point, so it was his hope that Luther would not carry on this vendetta. But apparently the man was not going to give up any time soon, and as such, he had to go and catch him. The Justice League still had to contend with the fact that Luther had escaped, and this time he was not alone, as the Ultra-Humanite was with him. Naruto was not too sure how to rate the gorilla-like being as a threat at first, but his centuries worth of experience was enough to remind him not to take people lightly. He did the same when he tangled with his old friend Rock Lee when he first met him. And of course, he learned never to take even ordinary-looking people. So he was going to take the word of Batman as they tried to locate them, and he soon decided to use his chakra sensory ability in Senjutsu and locate the now sickened chakra signature that Luther released, but before he could do that, a massive fire broke out, so they had to cut the chase short. Batman managed to enter a burning building to rescue a trapped young girl while the others helped the emergency response personnel as best they could on the other side of the complex as the fires were spreading. Apparently in their escape attempt, both of the two criminals had possibly set off a gas main that led to the fires. Naruto began to use his water jutsu to handle some of the blaze while the others dealt with the fires in their own fashion. However, Batman's situation had become a lot more serious as the flames continued to grow, and Batman was not the least bit happy about this. He did his best to remain calm and locate a viable exit point for himself, but the fire was not going to make it easy. However, before it could get any worse, he was soon rescued by Hawkgirl. However, he was not exactly thankful for the rescue, a fact that Hawkgirl noted very quickly and spoke. "You know, I usually get a thank you from those I rescue. I'm not used to being rescued. I can see that." As soon as he was set down, Batman moved away, and naturally the others saw that though they each had different takes on the matter. Corey was wondering why Batman was like that, but had her hands full helping care for the injured with the paramedics, though some of the males nearby could not help but stare at her, along with Wonder Woman and Hawkgirl, not like the reaction was anything new. However, the one thing that was glaring for all of them right now, especially Superman, was that Luther got away along Ultra-Humanite, and while Luther might not have all his assets with him, he was not going to count out the possibility that Luther had other assets only he could touch. They also had to worry about Mercy Graves as well. She and Luther might not see eye to eye, and he treated her like dirt on occasion, but she did love the guy and no doubt would pull some strings for him. The amount of strings, however, was still pretty much in contention, and as such they would have to make sure that they had eyeballs on her. In an abandoned warehouse. Inside the decrepit building, Cheetah came in and began to look for the one who had managed to contact her. It had been some time ever since her stint in Los Angeles that led to her running into the Hokage, and such she was a lot more focused on finding the way to make up for the money she had to leave behind. But that had been difficult to say the least, so when the offer came in for her to offer her services to an interested party willing to pay a fairly hefty fee, she did not say no. The one thing that she did not like was the fact that this was the kind of meeting place she had to go to. It all smelled of. What the hell? Cheetah visibly did not show it, but the stench of death she picked up immediately got her danger senses on. It was both an advantage and disadvantage to have the hunting senses of a predatory cat like a cheetah in the case of smell. The former, since it allowed her to smell out danger and potential things that could help. The latter is when it was assaulted by an overpowering stench, it overloaded her other senses. She looked around for the smell and soon heard footsteps coming towards her, and the stench only grew thicker as well. She soon turned, and lo and behold, it was none other than Solomon Grundy before her. And the grin on the zombie's face did little assure Barbara that she was going to be all right. "Pretty kitty, Grundy pet you." "No you don't." Cheetah quickly dodged the massive zombie's attempt to try and pet her senses revolted by both the sight and smell of the undead being before her. Not to mention the fact that she was well aware of the level of strength Grundy had and knew any form of petting from him, as he would phrase it, would either cripple or kill her. However, her counter-attack to force the zombie to back off did have one side effect, pissing him off. Bad kitty hurt Grundy. Grundy punish. The two of them were about to go at one another until they were parted by another arrival. The one in question was none other than Shade, and he commented a bit snidely about what was happening until his speech was interrupted by another set of arrivals. One being none other than Star Sapphire, a new arrival who had the close-cropped blonde hair and the get-up of someone who had a fascination with snakes and had two claw-like gauntlets that covered her thumbs and two fingers. They were soon joined by a fully armored figure who had a jetpack that was none other than the pyromaniac Firefly, and amazingly enough Atomic Skull. All of them were confused by the fact that all of them had been called here for some sort of job, but they did not have to wait long before they saw their employer and his associate. None other than Lex Luthor himself, an Ultra-Humanite, and it was clear to them all that this was going to be an interesting job. Once the introductions were done, the question they had in their heads came out, and Luthor answered. "Why, that job is simple. To destroy the League and Superman himself." The collected number of bad guys and girls in this case were different in reactions to the suggestion or rather plan of Lex Luthor. Grundy gave a slight grin that looked downright creepy on his face. Star Sapphire was smiling as well. Shade was calm. Cheetah sighed a bit, though it was clear that the idea of facing the League was not what she was looking forward to, especially when it concerned Hokage of all people. Copperhead could not help but raise her eyebrow at the idea, but seemed to be considering it carefully, but also had a smile on her face as she was interested in tangling with this Hokage character. Atomic Skull raised what would amount to his face as an eyebrow at that as well, but was more than ready to get paid for this chance to fight the League. Shade sighed a bit at that but seemed to be ready and not back down. Grundy was eager and had a growl due to the fact that he had faced the Hokage before after all and wanted payback. However, it was not long before someone else decided to speak his mind, and he was a lot more serious about the idea of them facing the League. Firefly spoke seriously. You want us to fight the League? Are you nuts? Is there a problem? Hell yes there is. I don't have problems fighting the Capes, but the Hokage. You even know just what that freaky ninja is capable of. No, fill me in then. Lex might not show it, but he was rather curious about this Hokage and had kept an eye on him for some time now prior to him being sent into this situation. Only time he didn't was when he was off on business with the whole incident with Aquaman. I ran into Deadshot a while back. He had been interrogated by the Hokage, who jammed freaking foot-long double-tipped steel needles into the bones of his legs. If that is not enough, he fired freaking lightning into Deadshot's legs and nearly cooked him. He literally lit Deadshot up like a fucking Christmas tree for making passes at Wonder Woman and Starfire until he apologized and then made him talk. You're kidding. Do I look like I am joking around, kitty cat? The guy's a fucking psycho. How the hell the League let that sadist into their ranks, I'll never know, nor do I give a shit. Cheetah was quite shocked at the idea of someone like the Hokage being the kind to use torture as a way to make people talk. How the heck could a guy like that be a Cape? Let alone be in the League? Still, when she met him, he did not seem to be the kind to use lethal force on her, though now she had doubts. Part of her wanted to cut and run, since there was no telling how a second meeting between her and the Hokage would turn out if he decided to do away with being nice. But the other part of her wanted to get the money needed to finally get away to free herself from the mistake she made that turned her into this. And the only way to finally do so was with money to fund what she needed to be cured. And Luthor, as much as she disliked him personally, having learned a lot of what he was capable of doing and what he had already done, she needed the money. So despite her worries, she decided to stay. Copperhead, on the other hand, smiled even more and spoke in a very husky tone. Ooh, now that is a man I'd love to see in action. I'm staying. Firefly, on the other hand. Screw this. I am gone. Lex raised an eyebrow at that, as he had not known that the blonde Hokage was actually the kind who was willing to use such lethal methods. Granted, Deadshot was not living up to the first half of his name, but that was quite a revelation. Enough for him to ignore the fact that he had just lost one of his hired muscle, though he kept in mind that Firefly was not as powerful as some of the people here. But it was not long before someone else decided to join in. Good riddance. This Hokage sounds truly worthy of my alliance with you. The others turned to see a tall young man who wore a half mask that covered the lower half of his face. He had armor on that was more in line with that of a crusader of some sort, but the way he moved and acted, he was hardly someone out in a costume. The fact that he was armed to the teeth meant that he was also someone who was not some fresh of the bus kind of person when it came to killing people. Lex sighed and nodded. Greetings, Astrahan. I am pleased you accepted the invitation despite your stance on things. I assure you that you will be properly compensated. Money is merely a tool to me, Luthor. Only hunting down my chosen prey is worthy of my alliance with you. The League just knew that something was going down, and Naruto was more than willing to agree with them as they entered the bank. When they got word that Ultra Humanite gained a number of hostages in the Metropolis Federal Bank, it sounded routine, but after the fact that he had escaped with Luthor, the League knew that there was more than merely a bank robbery going on. Sure, Ultra Humanite needed money, but attacking Metropolis directly sounded off to them, least of all Superman, as he had never dealt with him before. Batman agreed, since he had fought Ultra Humanite before, as he had a base of operations in Gotham, adding even more concern on this attack. As for Naruto, he was very wary of the whole situation before him and the others, even more so when they entered the bank, when his danger senses went on full sensory mode. Whenever his senses were on high alert for one reason or another, it always told him one thing. The shit was really going to hit the fan. And yet again they were right on the money, as the team now found itself under a full-scale attack, and this time they saw that Luthor was not alone. The villains coming with him were well known by them, though with the marked exception of Wonder Woman and Starfire, as neither of them had been among the heroes long enough to recognize any of the villains. Naruto read their files on the off chance he found them, though he had not expected to face them all at once. Of course he did recognize Cheetah, which in itself was odd, since she was not the type to work with others without good reason. The others were going to be a pain, to be sure, though he kept in mind that considering what he knew of them, they not used to working with a team and that perhaps could be their weak point. Superman spoke seriously as he saw Luthor wearing armor and the gleam in the bald man's eye told him that his longtime foe was spoiling for a fight. A fight he personally felt was no longer something that they could continue. Luthor, what is going on here? Lex sneered and replied with a blast of energy, and that was more than enough to serve as a signal for the collected band of villains to clash with the League. That same move also convinced Clark and the others that the time for talking was over and the time for beating up the villains was now. Clark was not happy with this but knew from the actions foe Luthor and the fact he was wearing full armor, no doubt built by Ultra-Humanite, and attacking him openly, that there was no other option but to fight. It did not take long for the warehouse to turn into a battlefield as the League and the collection of villains under Luthor's command were now mixing it up with one another. Already they broke apart to take on one of each on the opposing side. Batman was now tangling with Grundy as he had faced the being before, despite the fact he knew that as a zombie the foe he had to face was a pain in the ass to take down. Superman obviously tangled with Luthor, Wonder Woman was now fighting with Shade and Cheetah. Flash fought with Ultra-Humanite and Green Lantern was now fighting alongside Hawkgirl and Starfire as Star Sapphire and Atomic Skull came at them. Naruto on the other hand was now going to blows with none other than Copperhead while Astrahan was busy looking at Naruto in a way to get him an idea to how the blonde fought, showing that he was not some religious hysteric without any tactical thinking. It was going to be a tough fight for all the members of the League but there was no going back now. Naruto was not happy as he faced the female assassin who had the eyes of a snake, along with the scales and even the forked tongue of a snake when she smirked at him, which in his view of the situation detracted the fact that she was very attractive to the eyes. He could not help but feel like he was punched in the gut on how similar this one was to a certain snake-summoning bastard shinobi who had been a major bane to his life way back. The way she grinned might not have come close to that super creepy way Orochimaru smirked, but it came pretty darn close. And naturally he could not help but comment on the situation that had managed to find himself in when it came to the opponent before him. Great. Just great, I have to face the female version of that snake-summoning bastard here. If this is some cosmic entity's idea of a joke I am not laughing. Copperhead cocked her head to the side when she was able to hear those comments. She was curious about this snake summoner that apparently got on the blonde ninja's nerves. But for now though she had other plans in mind. She quickly launched several fast attacks at the blonde who proved able to fight back against her. She liked that a lot and had not faced anyone yet who could give her a real fight. But like any self-respecting villain, she had no intention of letting him get the upper hand for too long. She moved away from his attacks and had to admit he really knew how to move, and that excited the contortionist assassin greatly. Already less than stellar thoughts were cooking in her head and she was more than willing to put all of that to the test. The two traded blows with one another and right now the blonde managed to evade the claws on her hands and then several high spinning kicks at his face. The shinobi ducked the blows and leapt upward to avoid a sweep kick and then fired his own attacks at the female warrior assassin. Copperhead managed to avoid an axe kick but whistled in appreciation when the ground that she left behind actually sported a small but deep crater and she knew there and now that she was going to be in for a fight. Ooh, you're no Superman, but you certainly have the power. Let's see how you stack up. Bring it. The two began to throw punches and kicks at one another, and when she tried to use her claw gauntlets to cut into him, Naruto quickly used his ceramic armor to defend himself before moving to using his kunai since his swords were not ideal for this kind of close quarters fight. The clashing of metal on metal was heard and soon they were trying to overpower the other in terms of a full-on confrontation. Naruto managed to finally push Copperhead back even more and the woman was well aware that a direct battle with the blonde was not wise. But that hardly depressed her. In fact she relished this kind of a fight and soon rushed him. The blonde dodged the attack and blocked several strikes from her when she used the charge's momentum to her advantage to turn and attack him again. It became clear to him that she was trying to catch him in a grip, though why he had no idea. But it became clear to him quickly just what she had in mind when she suddenly fired some form of powder into his face in the guise of a punch that missed. The powder appeared to be some form of hallucinogen. Kurama quickly began to counter it, but it was all the time that Copperhead needed to wrap herself around the blonde ninja, making him aware that he was now in her control and he did not like that one damn bit. Copperhead smiled in a very seductive yet sadistic as she began to use her strength on the blonde shinobi and actually managed to lick his neck and spoke. You taste rather nice. U.R.K. Forgive me if I don't seem all that thrilled. Naruto managed to finally summon enough concentration once the drug was flushed out by Kurama and quickly used substitution to replace himself with a log. The surprise of the move caught Copperhead off guard and that allowed the blonde to move to the side and land a fist into her face, sending her back and away from him. The blonde was not in the mood for a rematch just yet as he caught his breath. Powerful as he was, Naruto was not invincible and he knew that for an absolute certainty. However, his chance to recover was cut short as none other than Cheetah came at him with her claws ready. The blonde quickly blocked her attacks and moved back while firing some smoke bombs at her. She blocked that but soon found out the smoke was mixed with a strong scent that overrode her ability to smell. That was the opening that Naruto needed as he closed the gap through the smoke, relying on his chakra sense to find her. Cheetah managed to block his punch, but the power was enough to send her flying back before she recovered as Naruto came out from the smoke. You again. Cheetah did not see his face, but the tone of voice from the ninja told her that he was confused by the fact that she was with the group. Not that she could blame him, since she usually did her best to work alone, since she did not put it above anyone who she might have worked with to sell her out to the company she was once part of. The slimy bastards had put a bounty on her head, and while not many came after her to get said bounty, that certainly did and mean that there was no one interested in the bounty either. But the money that was being placed on her was pretty tempting to be sure, and so here she was. Yeah, let's finish this. Naruto quickly got on the defensive and began to fight with Cheetah. Apparently after their little encounter in his city, the catgirl had decided to amp herself up a bit. The blonde on the other hand had also improved, and now they were moving as fast as they could, avoiding each other's attacks and lashing out with their own. This carried on for quite a bit as they continued to try and hit one another hard and fast, showing that Cheetah had been working out a lot more in preparation to fight him. And it was not long before Copperhead, fully recovered, came to the scene, and she had a very feral grin on her face, not a good sign in the minds of both Kurama and Naruto. Copperhead then did something that surprised anyone in seeing range as she kicked Cheetah back, not enough to hurt her or anything, but to warn her off. The transformed scientist and reluctant villainess was surprised by this and spoke back to Copperhead. What the hell? Back off, kitty, this little fox is mine. Naruto looked at the two female villains dumbstruck. Were the two of them actually fighting over him? That was proven to be true when the two of them, instead of double teaming him in combat, began to attack one another. Though in this case, it seemed that Cheetah was the one who was being attacked and was merely defending herself, and she was irate at the idea of having to fight the one who she was supposed to work with. Copperhead on the other hand was really getting it on with her supposed ally in this little beatdown. In fact, if he looked right at her eyes, she was actually enjoying the chance to get in a fight with Cheetah. Naruto could not help but feel that for the first time in his century-long life, he had no idea what to do and decided to leave and help the others instead of watching this literal catfight happen. However, Copperhead moved away from Cheetah for a moment to speak to him. Stay right where you are, Foxy. You and I have some unfinished business and I hate being interrupted. Okay. This is awkward. Not so much as what's about to hit. Move. Naruto heeded Kurama's warning and soon avoided several precise arrow shots at him. The blonde quickly used his sword to cut down the next batch of arrows. The blonde turned and soon clashing with the one who had apparently decided to stay after Firefly left and now decided to get involved with placing his head on a pike. The man was dressed in what appeared to some form of hybrid of Western chain mail with Kevlar. There were weird symbols there, and there happened to be quite an array of weapons on the guy. One of them appearing to be some form of Western sword, others were also blunt weapons, and who knew what else he had on his person. That coupled with his look made him look like a demon slayer of some sort, and his venom-laced words only confirmed that whole picture to Naruto. You foul demon spawn. Die. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the venomous tone in the man's voice and spoke. Who the heck are you? My name does not matter. What matters is I kill you. Naruto dodged the incoming strike from what appeared to be a morning star of sorts, and he also avoided another attack, this time with a short sword. Whoever this guy was, he was certainly not the kind of person who could be termed as a religious nut. Religious nuts did not have this level of training as he and Naruto began to clash hard with one another. The two dodged the attacks they threw at one another, and Naruto turned a bit to see that indeed Cheetah and Copperhead were now throwing down with one another. It still confused the hell out of him why that was the case, but he had little time to think about that as he avoided more attacks from his new would-be assailant. Naruto quickly dodged the next one and then slammed a kick into the side of the guy's head, sending him to the side, and he quickly charged in and landed a spinning heel kick to the shoulder. Gah! That blow made the man drop his morning star, and Naruto grabbed him by the front of his clothing and then tossed him hard into the ground like a flapjack. Now stay down. The man on the other hand was not in the mood to stay down for long. Never. The man got out what appeared to be a smoke bomb, and Naruto quickly moved away from the explosive device as it went boom, and soon smoke was all over the place. However, he did not get a reprieve as now both Cheetah and Copperhead were attacking him. Apparently whatever it was that got Copperhead willing to attack Cheetah had been temporarily put on hold, and now they were attacking him. Despite his situation, Naruto could not help but comment. Great. I just managed to avoid being brained by one seriously screwed over religious nutjob of an assassin. Now I'm being assaulted by a literal catgirl and a snake woman. Someone up there in the celestial realm must have a very twisted sense of humor. Cheetah had to admit that the humor in the statement was there, but she was more focused on beating the Hokage, and it seemed that Copperhead was in the same mindset as she attacked Naruto alongside Cheetah. Naruto quickly dodged the double team attack of a claw slash and a kick from Cheetah and Copperhead respectively. He flipped over them and soon landed on the ground on a handstand and landed a spinning kick to them that sent them back as he flipped back and faced them for a possible attack. The crazy religious assassin was back though and was now coming in to bash Naruto's head in. And while they were not happy with that, the two women came in to finish Naruto off, but it was here that Kori herself came in and landed one hell of a haymaker on the religious assassin's armored face. Stay away from my friend. You wretched Xeno witch. The Tamarani naturally did not take kindly to that and smashed a punch into the maw, and now they were fighting one another seriously, and when Solomon Grundy came to attack Superman, Diana came in and slugged the zombie gangster hard, and Naruto soon ducked as the being smashed into the nearby wall. But it was not over yet, as Grundy got up and was about to attack the two super-powered beings when he turned and spotted the Hokage, and from his growl of anger he apparently recognized Naruto. And he was not happy. You set Grundy on fire. Grundy crush you. The undead stench coming from Grundy made Naruto gag. Hell, even if the guy looked like he was resurrected by the Edo Tensei Jutsu, the ones who were brought back at least did not stink as bad as this guy. Yuck. You really need a bath. Ever consider dunking your stinky ass in a bathtub full to the brim of formaldehyde? RRRAAAAAHHHHH. Naruto dodged the incoming fists meant to take his head off and quickly charged in, and using his senjutsu, landed a haymaker of a blow on the zombie, even if his summoned nature chakra was not as strong as he would like with him being in a city and all that. The blow sent Grundy back, and Naruto pressed the attack before quickly taking a trick of his hated foe Madara's playbook and quickly slapped a number of explosive tags and quickly spoke as the zombie finally saw them. As I heard in a military series a while back on TV, fire in the hole. The zombie had enough wits to recognize that phrase and growled as the tags went boom, and since Naruto had taken to infusing some of his and Kurama's chakra into them for an extra punch, well, Grundy was sent flying back into the wall and was out like a light. The two women villains soon attacked again, but it was fairly obvious that Grundy's quick defeat was on their minds, though they obviously had different reactions. Cheetah was not too sure tangling with the Hokage was going to be worth it right now, while Copperhead was getting a high on this. And her next action made that clear as she quickly got close to Naruto and wrapped her hands around him when she evaded briefly his attack. The second she did so, she squeezed her and then readied her fangs to bite him. Come here, big boy, let me have a bite. Sorry, but I am not a buffet on legs. Naruto quickly got her off of him and sent the assassin away, and he was soon attacked by Cheetah. He dodged her attacks and managed to land a few blows on her despite the fact he was still recovering from the battle with Copperhead, and got her on a throw and landed her on the ground with a thump as he spoke to her. Why are you here, Cheetah? Why the heck do you care? You don't strike me as a mercenary who cares only for money. Don't ask me why, but I don't think you would have taken this path willingly. Cheetah had to admit that he was right in what he said, but she made her choice even if this was not what she wanted to do. Maybe, but here I am and I will not go out quietly. The others in the league were also having just as interesting a time as Star Sapphire clashed with Green Lantern. Clark obviously now had to deal with Luther. Diana was currently dealing with Shade, who thought he could fool the Amazon, only for her to knock him aside, and only by using his cane's power to keep her off balance did not wind up being a stain on the ground. Coriander was now fighting with Astron, who proved that despite him not being able to physically match the Tamarinine, he was not going to go down without a fight. Hawkgirl was now fighting with Grundy, and her mace proved one of the things that disrupted magic and that made the zombie scream in pain. Ultra Humanite was hardly not involved with the fight, as he was now facing none other than Flash alongside Batman, and the two were proving to be tough on the gorilla villain, but he was no slouch either. It was not long though that the fight swung in favor of the League, and it was clear to Luther that staying with the others like this was not going to swing into his favor. It enraged him, and that made the poison move again, which made him groan in pain, but he managed to get himself to focus on killing his longtime foe, just as Batman and Flash had to break away from Ultra Humanite when he drew a pistol firing energy bolts at them. And this allowed Atomic Skull to finally attack Batman, who was now going to have to get creative in fighting him. Shade was none too happy to be facing none other than Hawkgirl alongside Wonder Woman, who was keen on bashing him apart with her mace, and while he used his powers to evade her, it was not going to last forever. It only made things worse when Grundy was sent flying back and slamming into him, which spoiled his concentration. The only good thing that came out of the whole thing for him was the fact that the zombie now turned his attention on Hawkgirl, though her North Metal mace hitting him and actually causing him far more pain than most hits he got in the past certainly convinced the zombie that petting this female bird was a bad idea. Of course, being undead and not very bright in the time he was alive to begin with meant that Grundy was far from done. Neither was Hawkgirl though, as she smashed another blow into the zombie's chest. Flash had to quickly avoid several blasts from Star Sapphire, who decided to take him out to prevent him from supporting the others, and was having a field day and infuriating the woman villain before he made the mistake of not watching his direction and nearly smashed into a wall. He stopped, but quickly got attacked by Star Sapphire, who landed one hell of a punch to the face to send him flying back, but was soon saved quickly when a wall of green energy blocked her attack. She turned and was soon engaged by Green Lantern. Thanks, GL. Watch where you move next time, Flash. Green Lantern quickly moved to block another attack by Sapphire, and the fight between the two specializing in energy constructs was on. Flash quickly moved ahead to support the others and was soon there with John, who was now tangling with Shade, who had decided to help Star Sapphire, though it was obvious that the British woman was not pleased with having her fight become a double-team effort, but made no comment. Corey quickly came in to aid them by attacking Atomic Skull, who decided to hit them after recovering from several high-powered sonic batarangs courtesy of Batman that allowed the Dark Knight to kick him hard and fast from him, when they were not looking, as she had tossed her own foe aside for now to get to them. And when he tried to stir-fry her but not before ogling the Tamarinine, he was hit by a flying Solomon Grundy, courtesy of Hawkgirl, who was now called Bird Nose by Grundy. Batman found himself facing off with none other than Copperhead, and quickly recognized the way she fought as well as her powers. Yet that in itself was something that he had not expected at all, and for good reason. Only one person he knew fought like her, and even had the same name as well, at least the more open name. "You're not the Copperhead I know of." Copperhead flipped back like an acrobat and landed on her legs carefully before moving calmly, while giving the Dark Knight a sneer mixed with a seductive but violent gleam in her eyes. "Oh, you mean Nathan. Sorry, bad boy, but just because you fought him does not mean there aren't others with the Copperhead title. And I am nothing like him. Bring it on. Let's see if a bat can truly take on a Copperhead with some real bite." She moved with the speed of an acrobat and quickly launched several blows at Batman, showing that she was more aggressive but not foolish like Nathan. Batman could also see that her fighting style was taking advantage of the fact that she was a contortionist, as she was able to land blows at angles that would have been painful for any normal person to attempt. Batman, however, was able to hold his own against the woman, even with the fact that due to the same enhancements like Nathan, this woman was stronger and faster than he was. But like before, he knew that this was not going to be an easy fight. Unlike most of his more physical foes, with the marked exception of Bane, Copperhead was not going to be like them, as her moves were more acrobatic and flexible than most, and there was no doubt that she was more aggressive than Nathan was, and that was saying something. Batman was more than willing to continue the fight and quickly proved himself able to keep up with Copperhead, as he managed to avoid the same trick used by her on Naruto. He quickly moved closer and struck her hard on the chest and stomach before moving to use a judo move to get into the right area and moved to tossing her aside and into some nearby heavy desks. However, Copperhead was quick to react and quickly used her contortionist training to turn the throw into a trap and quickly subdued Batman, and when she had the chance to attack, she took it. The League nearby could only watch in anger and shock as she plunged her fangs into Batman with strong intent, and despite his armor on, the fangs cut in and hit Bruce, who screamed in pain. Quadruple A GGHHHHH. However, that was also the moment that she was grabbed by Wonder Woman's lasso and was pulled off of Batman, and before she could react to attack the Amazon, Diana was joined by Corey, and soon the snake-themed female villain was treated to one hell of a double-team assault, as Corey landed a punch to the stomach and Diana landed one to the face once they dealt with their own foes. Copperhead was actually lucky that both the Amazon and the Tamarinine were pulling their punches, otherwise she was going to get a quick trip to the cemetery. And her being knocked out finally convinced Luthor to call for a retreat, despite the fact that obviously enraged him to have to pull back from the fight. That and the fact that despite them still new to the whole teamwork bit, the League proved that they indeed had what it took to work as a team, though that was still too early to tell. Normally this would have been the signal for the League pursue them, but they did have Copperhead in custody, so they had to lock her up, but also to deal with a recent casualty of their own team as well. As the League moved to help Batman back at the Watchtower, it was clear to all of them, even Batman who was able to get enough wits about him, that this was merely the beginning. It made sense that eventually villains who had powers of their own as well as resources and assets would unite to face them as the League as a group as well. And right now, this group now being led by Luthor were in hindsight the prototypes of what was to come, as there was no doubt that there would be more. It helped that some of the more experienced members had dealt with team-ups of villains before as well. Unfortunately, Lex was showing the very traits that made many of his relationships, romantic or otherwise, very tempestuous. The best. What the hell was I thinking? Lex was none too happy about this. That was plainly obvious to all, and his rant only made things worse, as some of the villains were none too happy about being berated by the former CEO of LexCorp. With Star Sapphire speaking first, since she was not the kind to like being bossed around by someone like Luthor, let alone insulted as if she was just some regular thug being hired. This is a waste of time and pure bollocks. If you think you can do any better, then feel free to do this on your own. No amount of money is worth listening to you talk. The same sentiment spread to the others in the group who were willing to listen, and naturally it made Lex reconsider his actions, forcing him to double the amount he promised. That apparently had helped make Star Sapphire change her mind, but it was clear to Lex that this alliance was in severe need for new blood. With Copperhead now in custody, they would have to move fast and find a way to hit the League before they managed to make Copperhead crack. Unfortunately for Lex, he was going to have a brand new addition to the whole gang, except in this case, the new addition was someone one only worked with when one was very desperate, or crazier than the one was. The person in question, none other than the Joker himself, and how he managed to get into the place was something that made Lex Luthor less than happy. What are you doing here? Apparently that very same question was in the minds of everyone minus Grundy, as all of them had heard of Joker. And what they heard was anything but reassuring to their nerves. Why, I heard you were getting this little band of kiddies together to kick the pants of the League, so naturally with old Guano Man being one of the League's lineup I was thinking you need someone to deal with him. You think I haven't forgotten the last time I had your help, Joker? Oh come on Lexi. You did have Big Blue Boy Scout to deal with at the time, and I managed to help you with my old Jade Dragon pet, shame really, losing it the way I did. Luthor growled well at that, as he was well aware of what the statue was made of and how its material had put him on death's door. It doesn't matter. I am not asking for your help here, now get lost. You need my help, Lexi. Joker's grin did little to ease the feelings of disgust and mistrust Lex had for the man, and for good reason, one of which was the obvious insanity of the clown. There was no denying he was dangerous and capable, but had the predictability of unstable nitroglycerin carried in a leaking case by a drunk man in the hot sun. Hell, even he wondered how Harley Quinn, once a respected psychologist, had fallen for the maniac and side with him. He could also tell that the others were none too happy to have Joker in with them. Star Sapphire looked with distaste towards Joker. The same could be said for Cheetah. The same could be said for the men in this unit. Only exception to the whole group was Grundy, since the man was technically dead to begin with. Like I need a hole in my head. Joker gave a pout and spoke. Don't be mean, Lex. After all, I know that our little snake lady before being captured managed to bite my old buddy Batsy Boy. And that helps you. Oh, how exactly does the idea of Batman being a temporary chew toy for Copperhead help? Knowing the League, he will be fully healed soon enough. Because I know how Guano Man thinks, Lexi, and right now, he would be doing all he can to show that he is not going to be a burden, or he would need help from others who are not in his little family of pajama-wearing kitties. All he needs is a reason, and soon he will be on his way here to prove what I said, and he will be alone too. Joker then smiled wickedly and finished his little speech. And you know what that means, don't you? And Lex did, and was finally convinced to have Joker with them. Well then, I guess that means you are in this one, but you had better not lie to me. All right, I suppose that it is time to welcome our soon-to-come guest. Watchtower. The League were currently working on the aftermath of the battle with what appeared to be the exact counterpart of their group. The fact that they were apparently under Luthor's command only made the situation all the more complicated. Luthor was a very smart being, dangerous, cunning, and more, which was why until now, not even Superman could have him fully locked away. But with him leading a team of villains, several super-powered ones, then there was no doubt that things had just gotten complicated. Right now though, Superman had left Copperhead in prison and under heavy guard, with Diana coming along to make sure that she did not escape, and she was not alone, as Corey had gone with her. Apparently the Tamarinine took considerable offense to the fact that the woman had tried to bite and potentially end Naruto's life as well as Batman's. Even though she was not that close to the world's greatest detective, she saw him as an ally, and she did not like it one bit if her allies were ever hurt. Flash could not help himself as he spoke to Naruto, who was busy recovering from that not-so-nice encounter with the female assassin with the serious snake theme. Was I just seeing things back there, but did that woman get a high from trying to crush you and bite you? Naruto groaned and replied. No, she did get a high on that. I swear that woman creeps me out. If she decided to have pale skin and far freakier snake-themed powers, I'd have thought I was dealing with a female version of Orochimaru. That I do not need. Who? The blonde spoke to the confused speedster. Long story short, Orochimaru was a renegade ninja of my village who happened to be as powerful as a cage. And he had a very unhealthy obsession with power. That woman's fixation on me reminds of that creepy bastard. I can take heart in the fact that at least she's got none of that nut's powers in nature, though the whole thing is still creeping me out. Wally could tell that this was not a subject that he liked to talk about and decided to drop it for now. And for good reason, as he and the others decided to check on Batman and see how he was doing at the moment. Unlike Batman, Naruto had a strong healing factor, and due to the fact that he was able to counter Pamela Isley's poisons and her pheromones, he had a fairly accurate idea that he would be able to resist Copperhead's venom even if it would make him feel like crap afterwards. Batman, on the other hand, would not have that at all, and right now it was taking some time for him to recover. Thankfully, the medical bay of the Watchtower had a fully stocked medical suite, and right now Batman was recovering. As the two came in, he saw Superman talking with an obviously recovering Batman, and apparently they were discussing something that seemed to be the kind of thing that was really sensitive. You need to rest. There's no telling how the effects of the... I'm fine. Flash saw that and quickly revealed that he was smarter than most as he whispered to Naruto. Looks like he's okay, but I get the feeling that he does not like being benched. Better we let them focus on working things out. Naruto could tell that Flash had a point but spoke to him either way. Nah, you go on ahead, I'll keep an eye on this. You sure? Trust me on this, I've seen worse standoffs, and hell I've been a few in my day. All right. See you, old man. Naruto gave the speedster who grinned a bit a mock glare and replied. I am so going to get you for that. Naruto shook his head at the way Jean went at trying to convince Batman to rest. If there was one thing he could say about the Dark Knight, he was stubborn. Reminded him of himself actually when he was usually told he could not become a ninja way back when he was still seen as Kurama's jailer and not as a real person by the villagers who hated him. Prior to his growth as a ninja to greatness, he was the dead last in the academy, and had little to no talent. It was because of the work ethic and drive to succeed that he had made it this far. Of course, he had skirted on the edge of disaster more than once in the times he had reached his level of ability. The time training in the use of his wind affinity and fusing it with the Rasengan was one such instance, the training with Senjutsu was another. And he had no doubt that Batman right now did not want to be the weak link in a group of people with superhuman powers. That told him that sooner or later, there was going to be one heck of a problem and Batman was going to be the catalyst. That meant only one thing. Trail him. Near the hideout. Naruto groaned mentally to himself as he watched over Batman. He just knew that this was a bad idea with him going out on his own, but he respected the Dark Knight well enough to know that the why of him being here in this place on his own. That did not however mean he had to like the implications if the man got caught. Dealing with a band of thugs and one supervillain was all well and good, but this bunch of villains led by Luther began to make him recall one group that had been the bane of his life when he was older. Akatsuki. Granted, none of the team of villains had the abilities of that band of S-rank ninja, but he was not going to rule them out yet as a threat. Plus his experience with this gang was telling him that there was something going on and he had to be on his toes. He was not the only one to be thinking that as well as none other than Kurama spoke to him. Well, turns out that old Batman decided to do things his way. Reminds me of you a considerable deal, Naruto. Please, don't say that. I don't recall ever being that dark and brooding. True, but anyway, you do have to admit that this is not the best of ideas. Who knows what is going to happen? That makes two of us. Hold it. Oh hell no. Sure enough, things were about to get rather hairy as it were as he now spotted Batman being tracked by the villains, and since Batman was on his own before he showed up, he just knew this was not going to end well. Though he did keep in mind that Batman was not someone fresh out of the academy and moved to help him. Yep. This is about to get interesting. Hope that your idea is going to work. The move proved to be the right one as Batman was now being attacked by the group of villains and apparently the whole thing was planned this time around. The Dark Knight was about to be hit by Grundy in the face when he blonde quickly arrived and slammed a Rasengan right into the face of the zombie, sending him flying back like a comet from the proverbial bowels of hell. That attack stopped the others as they had no idea that Batman was being tracked and tailed as well, and now they knew that things were about to get interesting. Batman looked at Naruto and spoke sternly even when they were in the middle of this mess. What are you doing here? You seriously are asking me that question at a time like this? Batman did not respond as both he and Naruto now found themselves under attack by the team of villains brought in by Luther. It was not looking good at all, but neither of them were going to go down without a fight. Shade tried to cloak himself with his cane, but Naruto quickly fought back by using his kunai with the special tag, using the Hiroshin jutsu to get next to the man before he could react and smacked him right in the face with a fist. GG Grar RRR. Grundy came at Naruto from behind and Naruto quickly flipped over the zombie and quickly slapped some explosive tags on the zombie and those detonated to send the zombie back. Naruto quickly turned and used his kunai to block an attack from the same religious nutjob trying to smash his head open with the Morning Star. Batman was now trading or rather dodging blows from Ultra Humanite and also from none other than Cheetah. The Dark Knight might not say it, but he was well aware that this was a dangerous situation as the rest of Luther's team were now being supported by Luther himself in that suit that would no doubt hold off the poison at bay. He fired several batarangs at Luther to distract him and evade the blasts, but suddenly he found himself being attacked by some form of gas that made him cough even more and making him lose focus. Batman. Naruto quickly moved to support the Dark Knight once he managed to force the Demon Hunter back and then used a pair of shuriken to staple him to the wall. But had no choice but to disengage when Shade and Grundy came at him again, only this time the shadow-making pest used his power to hide Grundy from his sight. A neat trick to be sure, had it not been for the fact that the blonde had far sharper senses than most and had fought in situations like this one before. Even as the zombie tried to close the gap in the cover of the shadows summoned by Shade, the blonde quickly took out his sword and summoned his chakra to unleash a blast of pure air into the shadows, blasted Grundy away and allowed Naruto to attack Shade directly. The man was sent flying back and Naruto quickly moved to help Batman, but then he was soon attacked by Star Sapphire once more as she fired several beams that forced him off his course to his fellow league member, and he was not happy about it at all. But before he could counter, the same nutjob he had dealt with before appeared next to Batman's prone form with a drawn blade aimed right at the man's throat. And he was soon joined by none other than the clown prince of crime who apparently had a card on Batman's neck as well, and Naruto knew enough to know those cards had a razor-shaper cutting end, and having been the Dark Knighti's foe for a very long time, the guy would know where to best hurt the now-prone Dark Knight. The unspoken meaning for the move was not lost on the blonde warrior, and so he sheathed his sword and finally surrendered. That was the opening needed by Ultra Humanite to hit him in the back of the head and send him to unconsciousness, or as much as Naruto would willingly allow it. Naruto had a heck of a lot more toughness than most though, and the blow, while painful, was not as painful as the punches he got socked with by Tsunade, but he had to make it look like it hurt and that he was out cold, since this was the only option to avoid them killing Batman when he was like this. There would be time to escape later.